the familiar choreography of the dawn's brew morning rush flowing through her like second nature. The vintage diner hummed with life, the jukebox playing the Smiths, the hiss of the espresso machine, and the gentle patter of Seattle rain against windows that had seen decades of stories unfold. Her box braids swayed as she moved between tables, catching the warm amber light from the old-fashioned fixtures that gave the place its nostalgic charm. The regulars knew her smile, but today it felt different, more genuine, because of him. Michael Owen sat in his usual corner booth number 12, hunched over his laptop with the intensity of someone trying to outrun his own thoughts. His bomber jacket hung on the back of his chair, designer but understated, the kind of casual wealth that whispered rather than shouted. Caroline had served him the same order for 3 weeks straight. Black coffee, no sugar, wheat toast with a side of existential dread that he couldn't quite hide behind those piercing blue eyes. "Refill?" she asked, approaching his table with the glass pot that had become her excuse to study the way his jaw tensed when he concentrated. He looked up, and for a moment something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition of something he hadn't expected to find in a place like this. "Please." As she poured, Caroline noticed the way his fingers drummed against the table, not quite rhythmic, more like Morse code for anxiety. His phone buzzed insistently beside his laptop, email notifications lighting up the screen in an endless stream of corporate urgency. "You know," she said, setting the pot down with more confidence than she felt, "that thing has an off button." Michael's hand paused mid-drum. "What?" "Your phone. I've been watching you check it every 30 seconds for the past hour. That's," she did quick math in her head, "about 120 interruptions to whatever you're actually trying to accomplish." A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips. "You've been counting." Heat rose to Caroline's cheeks, but she stood her ground. "Occupational hazard. We notice patterns." She gestured around the diner. "Mrs. Henderson orders decaf, but adds 3 sugars because she misses the real thing. Jerry always asks for the check before he's finished eating because he's afraid of being late to work. And you," she tilted her head, studying him, "you're trying to control something that can't be controlled." Michael's blue eyes searched her face, and Caroline felt exposed under his gaze, like he could see through her practiced cheerfulness to the poetry she scribbled in stolen moments, to the mounting stack of bills she ignored on her kitchen counter. "Caroline, right?" he said, reading her name tag, but somehow making it sound like a question he'd been wanting to ask for weeks. "Right." She picked up the coffee pot again, suddenly aware of how her uniform, a simple black dress with the Dawn's Brew logo, felt too tight across her shoulders. "And you're Michelle, the guy who orders like he's afraid the coffee might judge him." This time he actually laughed, a real laugh that transformed his face, erasing the shadows under his eyes and making him look younger than the 30-something executive she'd pegged him as. "Guilty as charged." He reached for his phone as it buzzed again, then stopped himself, his hand hovering over the screen. "You're right about the control thing." "I usually am," Caroline said, her natural confidence finally breaking through her morning nervousness. "It's another occupational hazard." The moment stretched between them, loaded with possibility and the kind of recognition that happens when two people realize they've been circling each other's orbit without knowing it. The jukebox switched to a softer song, something indie and melancholic that matched the gray Seattle morning. "Caroline," Ruby, the head waitress, called from behind the counter. "Table 4 needs their check." The spell broke. Caroline blinked, remembering where she was, who she was. A girl with box braids and student loan debt, not someone who belonged in whatever world Michelle inhabited outside these walls. "I should," she gestured toward table 4, where an impatient businessman was tapping his credit card against the table. "Of course." Michelle's voice was quieter now, professional. He was already reaching for his phone again, the moment of connection slipping away like steam from fresh coffee. Caroline turned to leave, but something made her look back. Michelle was watching her, his expression unreadable but intense, like he was trying to memorize something important. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked, the question carrying more weight than it should have. He nodded, his fingers finding the back of his neck in what she was beginning to recognize as his nervous tell. "Same time tomorrow." As Caroline walked away, she felt the pull of his gaze like gravity, and for the first time in months the stack of bills on her kitchen counter didn't feel quite so heavy. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket, probably Rebecca with another passive-aggressive text about Caroline's lack of ambition, but she ignored it. Some things, she was learning, were worth controlling. But as she handed the businessman his check and watched Michelle through the window of the diner's kitchen, Caroline couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would change everything. and she wasn't sure if she was ready for that kind of change. The text arrived at 11:47 p.m., 3 hours after Caroline's shift ended, and 47 minutes after she'd finally stopped checking her phone. Coffee shop playlist suggestion. Anything that doesn't make me want to throw my laptop out the window. Michelle. Caroline stared at the message in her cramped studio apartment, sitting cross-legged on her second-hand futon with her poetry notebook balanced on her knees. The pen in her hand had been hovering over an unfinished verse about rainy mornings and unexpected connections, but now her thoughts scattered like coffee grounds. He had her number. When had she given him her number? Her fingers found their familiar rhythm against her thigh. Tap, 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 tap. The nervous habit that always betrayed her when she tried to play it cool. Outside her single window, Seattle's evening rain painted abstract patterns on the glass, and somewhere in the building, Mrs. Chen's television played late-night infomercials in Mandarin. She typed and deleted 7 different responses before settling on, "The Smiths are sacred at Dawn's Brew, but I might have something that won't make you want to commit technology murder." The response came faster than she expected. "Technology murder sounds dramatic. I prefer putting it out of its digital misery." Despite herself, Caroline smiled. This was dangerous territory, the kind of late-night texting that led to feelings she couldn't afford, not with someone like Michelle, who probably had more in his checking account than she'd see in 5 years of coffee slinging. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Rebecca's name lit up the screen with a photo of her friend mid-yoga pose, all athletic grace and Instagram-perfect lighting. "Hey, Becca," Caroline answered, wedging the phone between her ear and shoulder as she closed her notebook. "Girl, I just saw your story from work today." Rebecca's voice carried that particular edge it got when she was about to deliver unsolicited life advice. "You posted about some customer's coffee cup. Really?" Caroline glanced at her Instagram story, an artistic shot of Michelle's empty cup with steam still rising, captioned, "Stories in every sip." It had gotten more likes than usual, including one from an account she didn't recognize, but somehow hoped belonged to a certain blue-eyed regular. "It's called content, Beck. Some of us have to work for our followers." "That's exactly what I'm talking about." Rebecca's tone shifted into full motivational mode. "You're too smart to be making art out of dirty dishes. When are you going to do something real with your life?" The words hit harder than they should have. Caroline's fingers stopped their drumming, curling into fists instead. "Serving coffee is real life. Not everything has to be performative fitness videos and green smoothie endorsements. At least I'm building something. A brand, a following, a future." Rebecca's sigh carried through the phone like digital disappointment. "I just want more for you." "More according to who?" Caroline stood up, pacing the small space between her bed and kitchenette. "You know what? I'm tired. Let's talk tomorrow." "Caroline, wait." But Caroline had already hung up, her chest tight with familiar frustration. She stared at her reflection in the black window, seeing a woman in an oversized hoodie and mismatched socks, holding a phone that connected her to a world that constantly told her she wasn't enough. Another text from Michelle. "Still working on that playlist? What's your damage with upbeat music?" She typed back, "Bad breakup with a pop song. Long story. I've got time." Something about those 3 words made her sit back down on the futon, pulling her knees to her chest. This was how it started, wasn't it? The slow slide into caring about someone who lived in a different universe. "Let's just say I learned that Bruno Mars lies. Love songs don't end with happily ever after." Ah, a fellow cynic. Reformed optimist, actually. Much more dangerous. Why dangerous? Caroline stared at the question, her thumbs hovering over the keyboard. Because reformed optimists still believed in magic, even when they knew better. Because they noticed the way someone stirred their coffee and built entire fantasies around 3 weeks of small talk. Because they were stupid enough to think that maybe, just maybe, the universe had a sense of humor about matching waitresses with millionaires. "Because we remember what hope feels like," she typed, then deleted it. "Because we fall harder when we finally fall," she wrote, then deleted that too. Finally, she settled on, "Because we're the ones who still believe in plot twists." I could use a good plot twist. The vulnerability in that admission made her chest ache. She could picture him in whatever expensive apartment he called home, probably sleek and minimalist, nothing like her cluttered studio with its poetry-covered walls and second-hand everything. But somehow, she could also picture him looking as lonely as she felt. "What kind of plot twist are you hoping for?" she typed, her heart hammering against her ribs. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times. Whatever he was going to say, he was being careful about it. The kind where the coffee shop regular turns out to be braver than he thought. Caroline read the message 3 times, each reading making her pulse quicken. This was it, the moment where she could play it safe, make a joke, keep him at arm's length. Or she could step off the cliff and see if he'd catch her. Her fingers moved before her brain could stop them. The barista might be braver than she looks too. Guess we'll find out tomorrow. Guess we will. After he said goodnight, Caroline sat in the quiet of her apartment, listening to the rain and the distant hum of the city. Her poetry notebook lay open beside her, the unfinished verse waiting for its ending. She picked up her pen and wrote, "Sometimes brave looks like saying hello. Sometimes it looks like saying yes, and sometimes it looks like admitting you're scared of both." Tomorrow felt loaded with possibility and terror in equal measure, but for the first time in months, Caroline fell asleep smiling, instead of counting the bills she couldn't pay. He didn't show up at his usual time. Caroline tried not to watch the door at 8:15 a.m., when Michelle's bomber jacket should have appeared through the rain-streaked glass. She wiped down table 12 twice, rearranged the sugar packets and caught herself smoothing her braids in the reflection of the coffee machine. 8:30 came and went. Then 9 fonked. "You keep staring at that door like it owes you money," Ruby observed, sliding past with a tray of steaming pancakes. At 62, the head waitress had seen enough Dawn's Brew romances bloom and wither to recognize the signs. "I'm not staring," Caroline lied, turning her attention to the morning prep work. But her fingers found their familiar drumbeat against the counter. Tap, 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 betraying her nerves to anyone paying attention. The morning rush ebbed into the quiet between hours, when the diner held its breath before the lunch crowd descended. Caroline was refilling the napkin dispensers when her phone buzzed. "Running late. Lawyer meeting ran over. Save me some coffee. M." Relief flooded through her so suddenly she nearly dropped the stack of napkins. He wasn't avoiding her. He wasn't having second thoughts about their late-night text conversation. He was just late. "I'll keep the good stuff warm," she replied, then immediately wondered if that sounded too eager. "You're an angel." The word angel sent warmth spreading through her chest, and Caroline found herself smiling at the napkin dispenser, like it had just told her a particularly good joke. When Michelle finally appeared at 10:20, he looked like he'd been through a battle. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, and there were new lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult conversations. "Rough morning?" Caroline asked, already pouring his coffee before he'd fully settled into booth 12. "Rough month," he corrected, accepting the cup like it was a lifeline. "My ex is trying to contest our settlement agreement. Apparently stealing $200,000 wasn't enough. Now she wants more." Caroline set the coffee pot down carefully, processing this glimpse into the storm behind his tired eyes. "I'm sorry, that's completely insane?" Michelle ran a hand through his hair, making it stick up at odd angles. "Yeah, my lawyer agrees. Said it's a fishing expedition, but it still means more meetings, more paperwork, more—" He gestured vaguely at his phone, which was buzzing with notification after notification. "More checking your phone every 30 seconds, Caroline ventured, settling into the booth across from him without asking permission. The morning lull meant she could steal a few minutes, and something about his defeated posture made her throw caution to the wind. Michelle looked up, surprised to find her sitting across from him, but didn't protest. "Exactly." He reached for his phone automatically, then caught himself. "See? It's like a reflex now. What if you gave it to me?" "What?" Caroline held out her hand, palm up. "Your phone for the next 20 minutes. Let me hold on to it while you drink your coffee and remember what quiet feels like." Michelle stared at her outstretched hand like she'd asked him to hand over his firstborn child. "I can't. What if my lawyer calls? What if there's an emergency at work? What if there isn't?" Caroline kept her hand steady, her dark eyes meeting his blue ones. "What if for 20 minutes you just exist, without managing, without monitoring, without controlling every possible outcome?" The silence stretched between them, filled with the distant clatter of dishes and the soft jazz Ruby had put on the sound system. Michael's fingers twitched toward his phone, then toward the back of his neck, then back to his phone. "You think I'm pathetic," he said quietly. "I think you're human," Caroline replied. "I think you're doing the best you can with a really shitty situation, and I think—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think you might be the only person in your life who's allowed to have problems without also having to solve them immediately." Something shifted in Michael's expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition, like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to give him permission to not have all the answers. Slowly, he reached for his phone, powered it down, and placed it in Caroline's palm. Her fingers closed around it, warm from his touch and heavy with trust. 20 minutes, she confirmed. 20 minutes, he agreed. For the first time since she'd known him, Michel's shoulders relaxed. He leaned back in the booth, cradling his coffee cup with both hands, and looked around the diner like he was seeing it for the first time. "It's different when you're not half focused on something else," he observed. "Everything is," Caroline said. She tucked his phone into her apron pocket, fighting the urge to check her own. "Tell me something that has nothing to do with lawyers or ex-girlfriends or work." Michel considered this, his brow furrowing in concentration. "I used to play piano." "Used to? Haven't touched the keys in, God, probably 2 years, maybe 3. I keep meaning to get back to it, but there's always something more urgent." He took a sip of coffee, and for a moment, his face softened with memory. "I had this old upright piano in my first apartment. Piece of junk, half the keys stuck, but I loved that thing. What happened to it? Lila, my ex, said it didn't fit the aesthetic of our new place. Too bulky, too old-fashioned." His jaw tightened slightly. "I sold it to make her happy." Caroline felt a flare of anger toward this woman she'd never met, this Lila, who had taken not just money but music from the man sitting across from her. "What kind of songs did you play?" "Everything. Classical, jazz, some pop songs I'd figure out by ear." Michel's eyes brightened, the stress lines smoothing from his face. "There was this one piece by Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major, that I could play when I couldn't sleep. Something about the repetition, the patterns. It quieted my mind." Caroline found herself leaning forward, drawn by this glimpse of who Michel was when he wasn't being crushed by circumstances. "You should play again." "Maybe," he said, but it sounded like maybe yes instead of maybe no. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of his phone in her pocket, feeling less like a burden and more like a secret they were sharing. Outside, Seattle's perpetual drizzle continued its gentle percussion against the windows, and inside, Caroline found herself thinking that 20 minutes might not be nearly enough. "Time's up," she said reluctantly, checking the clock above the kitchen door. Michel followed her gaze and blinked in surprise. It felt like 5 minutes. "That's what happens when you're actually present for your life," Caroline said, pulling his phone from her apron. As she handed it back, their fingers brushed, sending electricity up her arm. "Thank you," he said, and the weight behind those 2 words suggested he was thanking her for more than just phone-sitting duty. "Anytime." Caroline stood to leave, then turned back. "Michel, the piano thing. That wasn't just small talk, was it?" He looked up at her, his blue eyes clearer than she'd seen them. "No, it wasn't." As Caroline walked back to her tables, she carried the image of Michel's face when he'd talked about music. Open, peaceful, young. It was a face she wanted to see again. But first, she had to figure out how to tell him that the phone in his pocket had buzzed 7 times while she'd been holding it, and one of those calls had been from someone named Lila. Caroline waited 3 days to tell him about the calls. 3 days of watching Michel check his phone less frequently, of seeing him smile when their eyes met across the diner, of late-night texts that had evolved from coffee preferences to childhood stories to the kind of vulnerable honesty that made her chest ache with possibility. 3 days of carrying the weight of 7 missed calls and wondering if keeping his phone had been a kindness or a betrayal. The decision was made for her on Thursday morning when Michel arrived at Dawn's Brew looking like he'd been hit by a freight train. His bomber jacket hung loose on his frame. His usual designer stubble had grown into something more desperate, and his hands shook slightly as he reached for his coffee cup. "Rough night?" Caroline asked, but she already knew the answer from the dark circles under his eyes. "She called," Michel said without preamble. "Lila, last night, around midnight, said she needed to talk, that there were things I didn't understand about why she took the money." Caroline's heart sank into her stomach. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing. I hung up." Michel rubbed the back of his neck, the gesture more agitated than usual. "But then she kept calling. 15 times, Caroline, 15 times until I finally turned my phone off." The number hit her like a physical blow. 7 calls during their 20-minute conversation, 8 more afterward. Lila hadn't just been trying to reach him. She'd been hunting him. "Michel," Caroline began, her voice carefully controlled, "I need to tell you something." Something in her tone made him look up sharply. "What?" "When I had your phone on Tuesday, it rang 7 times. The words felt like stones in her mouth. One of the calls was from Lila. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael's face went through several expressions: confusion, realization, and finally something that looked dangerously close to betrayal. "You knew," he said quietly. "You knew she was trying to reach me, and you didn't tell me." "I didn't know what to—" "You didn't know what to do?" Michel's voice rose, drawing glances from other diners. "How about telling me? How about letting me make my own decisions about my own life?" Caroline felt her defenses rise, her fingers finding their familiar drumbeat against her thigh. "You asked me to hold your phone so you could have 20 minutes of peace. I gave you 20 minutes of peace. You gave me 20 minutes of ignorance," Michelle shot back. "Do you have any idea what this means? What if she was calling about the legal case? What if something happened that I needed to know about immediately? What if she was just trying to manipulate you?" Caroline's voice matched his intensity now. "What if those 7 calls were just her testing to see how quickly she could get you to jump when she whistled? That's not your call to make, isn't it?" Caroline leaned forward, her dark eyes flashing. "You handed me your phone because you couldn't stop yourself from checking it every 30 seconds. You asked me to help you take a break from the constant anxiety, and when I did exactly that, you're angry at me for it." Michel opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, his jaw working silently. Around them, the diner had gone quiet except for the soft jazz and the hiss of the espresso machine. Ruby was pointedly ignoring them while wiping down the same section of counter for the 3rd time. "This is about control," Caroline continued, her voice softer now but no less intense. "You're terrified that something might happen without you knowing about it immediately, managing it immediately, fixing it immediately. But you know what? Some things can't be controlled, Michelle. Some things just have to be lived through." "Easy for you to say." Michelle's words came out bitter, defeated. "You don't have an ex-girlfriend trying to destroy your life. You don't have lawyers calling at all hours, employees questioning your judgment, a business that could collapse if you make one wrong move." The comment hit its mark. Caroline felt herself shrinking back into the booth, reminded of the gulf between their worlds. What did she know about managing a company, about legal battles, about having anything worth destroying? "You're right," she said quietly. "I don't know what any of that feels like. I'm just a waitress who thought she was helping." Something in her tone must have penetrated Michel's anger, because his expression shifted, the fury draining away to reveal something raw and frightened underneath. "Caroline, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." She stood up, smoothing down her uniform, with hands that trembled slightly. "And maybe you were right to mean it. Maybe I don't understand your world well enough to make decisions about it. That's not what I—" But Caroline was already walking away, her box braids swaying with each determined step toward the kitchen. Behind her, she heard Michel call her name once, then the sound of his chair scraping against the floor. She didn't turn around when the bell above the door chimed his exit. Ruby appeared beside her at the coffee station, wordlessly handing her a clean towel that Caroline realized she needed when her vision blurred. 23 years I've been watching people fall in love in this place," Ruby said quietly. "And you know what I've learned? The fights that matter aren't about who's right. They're about who's scared." "I'm not in love with him," Caroline protested, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Honey," Ruby's voice was gentle but knowing, "you've been checking that door every morning for 3 weeks. You've been smiling at coffee cups and humming while you wipe tables. If that's not love, it's the best dress rehearsal I've ever seen." Caroline's phone buzzed in her apron pocket. A text from Rebecca. "Saw your Instagram story from yesterday. Still posting about random coffee moments? Girl, when are you going to get serious about your life?" The timing felt like the universe's idea of a cruel joke. Here she was, having her first real fight with the first man who'd made her feel something in years, and Rebecca was criticizing her for finding magic in small moments. She typed back, "Some of us find meaning in unexpected places." Rebecca's response came immediately, "And some of us waste time romanticizing dead-end situations. Just saying." Caroline stared at the message, feeling the weight of judgment from 2 directions. Too naive for Michel's complicated world, too settled for Rebecca's ambitious one. Caught between people who saw her as either too much or not enough, never just right. Her phone buzzed again. Not Rebecca this time. "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" M. Caroline read the message 3 times, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to run after him and smooth over the rough edges of their first real conflict. But another part, the part that had been hurt by his casual dismissal of her world, held back. "I need some time," she finally typed, "to think. I understand. But Caroline, what you did on Tuesday, those 20 minutes, They were the best part of my week. I don't want to lose that. The admission hit her square in the chest, knocking the breath from her lungs. She could picture him typing those words, probably standing outside in the Seattle drizzle, his hair getting wet while he tried to find the right way to apologize. They were the best part of mine too, she admitted. That's what makes this complicated. The response came quickly. Complicated doesn't have to mean impossible. Caroline tucked her phone away without responding, but the message stayed with her through the rest of her shift. As she served coffee and cleared tables and deflected Ruby's knowing looks, she found herself thinking about piano music and 20-minute conversations, and the way Michel's eyes had looked when he talked about something he loved. Maybe complicated didn't have to mean impossible, but it also didn't have to mean easy. The playlist arrived at 2 a.m. with a message that made Caroline's heart skip, for when complicated feels overwhelming. Caroline lay in her narrow bed, staring at her phone screen in the blue darkness of her studio apartment. 17 songs, each title a small revelation. Breathe Me by Sia, Mad World by Gary Jules, The Night We Met by Lord Huron, music for 2 a.m. thoughts, and the kind of loneliness that only felt safe to acknowledge in the dark. She pressed play and let the melancholy wash over her, each song feeling like a page from Michael's diary that he'd never intended to share. By the third track, Bon Iver's Restacks, she was crying, not from sadness but from recognition. This was what heartbreak sounded like when it was honest instead of angry. Her fingers hovered over her phone keyboard for 20 minutes before she found the courage to respond. It's beautiful and heartbreaking. Are you okay? The reply came immediately, like he'd been waiting by his phone. Define okay. Sleeping, eating, remembering to breathe. 1 out of 3. You? Caroline considered lying, painting herself as the together one in this mess they'd created, but something about the vulnerability of his playlist made honesty feel like the only option. 0 out of 3, but I made coffee at midnight and pretended it was therapy. Did it work? About as well as your playlist probably worked for sleeping. Touché. They texted until sunrise, the conversation meandering through apologies and explanations, and the kind of careful honesty that felt like walking on ice. By the time Caroline's alarm rang at 6 a.m., they'd reached a fragile truce built on mutual exhaustion and the acknowledgement that they'd both said things they didn't mean. See you at the usual time? Michelle asked as Caroline prepared to start her day. Yeah, but Michelle, yeah. We need to talk, really talk, not fight, not defend, just talk. I'd like that. Caroline arrived at Dawn's Brew 30 minutes early, using the extra time to write in her poetry notebook while the morning light filtered through rain-streaked windows. The words came easier than they had in weeks. Some conversations happen in the spaces between words, in playlists sent at 2 a.m., and the careful way we choose our honesty when pride costs too much to maintain. She was still writing when Michel appeared at 8:15, punctual as always, but different somehow. His usual armor of pressed clothes and confident posture had been replaced by jeans, a simple grey sweater, and an uncertainty that made him look younger. Hey, he said, sliding into booth 12. Hey. Caroline closed her notebook and poured his coffee without being asked. You look tired. You look beautiful, he replied, then blinked in surprise at his own honesty. Sorry, I didn't mean to just blurt that out. Heat rose in Caroline's cheeks, but she didn't look away. Thank you. For the compliment and for the playlist. I've never had anyone make me a soundtrack for insomnia before. First time for everything. Michel wrapped his hands around his coffee cup like it was an anchor. Caroline, about yesterday. You were scared, she interrupted gently. I get that now. When you found out about the calls, it probably felt like I'd made decisions about your life without asking, and that's exactly what Lila used to do. Michelle's blue eyes widened slightly. How did you? Because I've been thinking about it all night, about what it would feel like to have someone control information, manipulate situations, make choices for you, disguised as helping you. Caroline leaned forward, her voice soft but clear. I didn't mean to do that, Michel. I really was just trying to give you some peace, but I understand why it felt like something else. The relief that crossed Michel's face was immediate and profound. Thank you for understanding. And you were right too, about the control thing. I've been so terrified of being blindsided again that I've turned hypervigilance into an art form. Has it helped? The constant monitoring? Michel considered this, his fingers finding the back of his neck in the gesture Caroline had come to recognize as his tell for deep thought. No, If anything, it's made everything worse. I'm exhausted all the time, paranoid about every phone call, every email. I'm living like I'm constantly under attack. What would it look like if you weren't? I don't know, Michelle admitted. I've been in crisis mode for so long I'm not sure I remember what normal feels like. Caroline reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. The touch was electric, but more than that, it was steady. Maybe we could figure it out together, what normal looks like. Michelle turned his hand palm up, threading their fingers together. I'd like that. But Caroline, I need you to know. This thing with Lila, it's not going away anytime soon. The legal stuff is messy and she's persistent. If we do this, whatever this is, it's going to be complicated. I'm not afraid of complicated, Caroline said, and was surprised to realize she meant it. I'm afraid of dishonest. I'm afraid of being treated like I'm too naive to handle reality. But complicated? I can work with complicated. Even if complicated includes an ex-girlfriend who calls at midnight, and lawyers who never sleep, and a guy who's still figuring out how to trust again. Caroline squeezed his hand. Even then, but I have complications too. Student loans that keep me awake at night. A best friend who thinks I'm wasting my life. Dreams that feel too big for someone who serves coffee for a living. Those don't sound like complications, Michelle said quietly. Those sound like real life. And for what it's worth, I don't think you're wasting anything. I think you're the most present person I've ever met. What does that mean? It means when you're talking to someone, you're actually talking to them. Not thinking about the next meeting or the next problem or the next emergency. You're just there. Do you know how rare that is? Caroline felt tears prick her eyes. But they were good tears. The kind that came from being seen clearly and liked anyway. You make me sound better than I am. I don't think that's possible. They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined across the worn formica table, while around them the diner hummed with morning life. Ruby refilled coffee cups and hummed along to the jazz, studiously ignoring their joined hands but smiling to herself. So what now? Caroline asked eventually. Now we try, Michelle said. We try to be honest with each other, even when it's scary. We try to be patient while I learn how to trust, and you learn that your dreams aren't too big. We try to figure out what normal looks like for two people who are probably too stubborn for their own good. That sounds like a good plan. It's a terrible plan, Michelle corrected, grinning. But it's the only one I've got. Caroline laughed, the sound bright and clear in the morning air. Good thing I'm fond of terrible plans. Yeah? What's the worst plan you've ever had? Caroline looked at their joined hands, at Michelle's face open and hopeful in the Seattle morning light, at the future stretching ahead of them like an unwritten song. Falling for a guy who orders the same coffee every day and tips like he's apologizing for existing. How's that working out for you? Caroline's phone buzzed, with what she knew would be another judgmental text from Rebecca, but for once she didn't reach for it. Instead, she kept her eyes on Michelle's face and her hand in his. Ask me again in a few months. The Instagram post appeared on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after Caroline and Michelle's reconciliation, and it changed everything. Caroline was restocking napkin dispensers when her phone exploded with notifications. Likes, comments, and DMs flooding in faster than she could process. Her hands shook as she opened the app to find a photo Rebecca had posted. Caroline and an old college friend, Marcus, at last month's poetry reading downtown. They were laughing, Caroline's hand resting casually on his shoulder, both of them lit by the warm glow of the coffee shop's stage lights. The caption read, "Some people are just meant to be together. Congratulations to my beautiful friend Caroline on finding her perfect match, poetry and passion. It doesn't get better than this. Love wins. Poetry, lovers, soulmates." Caroline's heart stopped. The photo was innocent. Marcus was gay and married, had been for 3 years, but Rebecca had cropped out his husband and captioned it like Caroline had just announced an engagement. Her phone rang immediately. Michael's name on the screen. "Caroline?" His voice was tight, controlled in the way that meant he was holding back something dangerous. "We need to talk. Michelle, I can explain." "Not over the phone." The line went dead. Caroline stared at her phone, her fingers automatically finding their drumbeat against the counter. Around her, the diner continued its normal rhythm, but she felt like she was drowning in plain sight. "Honey, you look like you've seen a ghost," Ruby observed, appearing beside her with a concerned frown. "Worse," Caroline managed. "I've seen social media." Ruby's expression hardened. At 62, she'd watched enough relationships implode over digital misunderstandings to recognize the signs. "Show me." Caroline handed over her phone. watching Ruby's face darken as she read the post and scrolled through the increasingly excited comments from people who thought they were witnessing a love story. "Lord have mercy," Ruby muttered. "Who is this girl, and why does she have a death wish for your happiness?" "Rebecca, my friend." The word tasted bitter. "She thinks she's helping, I think. In her mind, Marcus is successful, educated in the arts. He's what I should want." "And what do you want?" Caroline looked toward booth 12, where Michelle would usually be sitting by now. Empty. "I want Michelle to walk through that door so I can explain before this gets worse." But when Michelle finally appeared 20 minutes later, Caroline knew immediately that explanation time had passed. His face was a mask of professional composure, the kind he probably wore in boardroom confrontations. He bypassed his usual booth and approached the counter directly. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Privately." Caroline nodded to Ruby, who jerked her head toward the break room. 10 minutes, Ruby said firmly. "Then I'm coming to check on you both." The break room was cramped, filled with employee lockers and the persistent smell of industrial coffee. Caroline perched on the edge of the single chair, while Michelle paced the small space like a caged animal. "So," he said finally, not looking at her, "poetry and passion. Congratulations. Michelle, that photo is from last month. Marcus is married to a man named David. They have 2 kids. Michelle stopped pacing. "What?" Rebecca posted an old photo and made up a story. "I don't know why. Maybe she's trying to prove some point about who I should be with. Maybe she really thinks she's helping, but it's not real." Some of the tension left Michelle's shoulders, but his expression remained guarded. The comments seemed pretty convinced, because Rebecca made it sound like an announcement. "People are congratulating me on a relationship that doesn't exist with a man who's been happily married since before I met you." Michel sat heavily on a milk crate, his head in his hands. "God, Caroline, when I saw that photo, all I could think about was Lila. The lies, the deception, the way she made me feel crazy for questioning things that didn't add up." Caroline knelt beside him, her hands covering his. "I'm not Lila. I know that. Logically, I know that." Michel looked up, his blue eyes haunted. "But when I saw you with another man, looking happy, with all those comments about how perfect you were together, it was like being hit by a truck. All that progress I thought I'd made just disappeared. What can I do? How can I fix this?" "You can't fix my trauma, Caroline. That's not your job." Michelle's voice was tired but clear. "But I need to know, why would your best friend post something like that if she knew it wasn't true?" Caroline felt heat rise in her cheeks, part anger and part shame. "Because she doesn't approve of you, of us. She thinks I'm settling for someone who doesn't understand my world, someone who'll never really fit. And what do you think?" The question hung in the air between them. Caroline realized this was the moment, the choice Rebecca had been pushing her toward, whether consciously or not. Choose the safe option, the socially acceptable option, the man who looked good in photos and checked all the traditional boxes, or choose the complicated, messy, real thing sitting in front of her. "I think," Caroline said slowly, "that Rebecca has never been in love, not really, because if she had been, she'd know that love isn't about fitting into neat categories or looking perfect on Instagram. It's about finding someone who makes you braver than you thought you could be." "And do I make you braver?" Caroline smiled, the first genuine smile she'd managed since seeing the post. "Michel, 3 months ago I was a girl who wrote poetry in secret and never spoke up when people dismissed my dreams. Now I'm sitting in a break room fighting for something that matters to me. If that's not brave, I don't know what is." Michel reached up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry my past made me assume the worst. I'm sorry my friend is apparently sabotaging my life. I need to deal with this." "What are you going to do?" Caroline stood, pulling out her phone with decisive movements. "I'm going to post the truth about Marcus, about David, about Rebecca's creative editing, and then I'm going to have a very honest conversation with my oldest friend about boundaries and respect. That won't be easy." "No," Caroline agreed, "but some things are worth fighting for." As she started typing her response post, a photo of Marcus and David at their wedding, with a clear explanation of the truth, Caroline felt something shift inside her. For too long, she'd let other people define her narrative, shape her story, decide what she deserved. Not anymore. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Saw all the likes on the post. You're welcome. Maybe now you'll see what you could have if you aimed higher." Caroline showed the message to Michelle, who whistled low. "She really doesn't know when to quit." "No," Caroline said, her fingers already flying over her keyboard. "But she's about to learn. The message she sent back was short and clear. We need to talk, today. And Rebecca, this friendship only works if there's respect on both sides. Time to decide if that's something you can manage. Michelle read over her shoulder and smiled. Now, that's brave. I learned from the best, Caroline replied, leaning down to kiss him softly. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. Ready to face the world? With you? I think I can handle anything. But as they prepared to leave the break room, Caroline's phone rang one more time. The name on the screen made Michelle's face go pale. Lila. She knows, Michelle said quietly. About us. Somehow she knows. Michelle answered the phone. Caroline watched his face transform as Lila's voice filled the cramped break room, honey-sweet and poison-sharp even through the speaker. Hello, Michelle. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. The emphasis on important made Caroline's skin crawl. Michelle's hand found the back of his neck, but his voice remained steady. What do you want, Lila? Can't an old friend call to check in? I saw some interesting photos on social media today. You've been busy. Caroline's blood ran cold. Somehow Lila had connected the dots between Rebecca's post and Michelle. The woman who had stolen $200,000 was now stalking his social media presence. I don't know what you're talking about, Michelle said, but his eyes met Caroline's with a warning. Oh, come now, don't be modest. Your new girlfriend is quite pretty. Caroline, isn't it? Works at that little diner downtown. Dawn's Brew, right? The casual way Lila said her name, her workplace, made Caroline feel exposed, vulnerable. This woman knew where she worked, probably knew where she lived. The thought sent ice through her veins. Leave her out of this. Michelle's voice went dangerously quiet. I'm not doing anything, darling. Just observing. It's fascinating, really, watching you play house with someone so different from your usual type. My usual type being criminals. Lila's laugh was like broken glass. Your usual type being someone who understands your world. Someone who can match your lifestyle, your expectations, your needs. This girl, she's sweet, I'm sure, but Michelle, she's a waitress. What could you possibly have in common? Caroline felt the words hit like physical blows. Every insecurity she'd ever had about Michelle's wealth, his education, his sophisticated world came rushing back. She was a waitress. She did serve coffee and clean tables and worry about student loan payments. What was she doing thinking she belonged in his life? More than you and I ever did, Michelle said firmly, and certainly more than you and I have now. Do you really think she'll understand when the pressure gets intense? When the lawyers start calling at all hours, when the media picks up the story, when her little coffee shop life gets turned upside down? Because, Michelle, this is just the beginning. What do you mean? The settlement negotiation. My lawyer thinks we can get more, especially now that you're so distracted. A man in love makes different choices, doesn't he? More generous choices. Caroline saw it then. The trap Lila was setting. She'd found Caroline not as a threat to eliminate, but as leverage to use. A weakness to exploit. You're insane if you think... I think, Lila interrupted, that Caroline deserves to know what she's signing up for. The scrutiny, the judgment, the constant pressure. Does she know about the anxiety attacks, Michelle? The medication? The nights you can't sleep because you're so afraid of being betrayed again? Michelle's face went white. These were intimate details, private struggles that Lila was weaponizing like ammunition. That's enough, Caroline said, stepping forward. She'd been silent too long, letting this woman dissect her relationship like a specimen under a microscope. Oh, she speaks. Hello, Caroline. I'm Lila. I'm sure Michelle has told you all about me. He's told me enough, Caroline replied, her voice steadier than she felt. I know you're a thief. I know you're trying to manipulate him. And I know you're calling because you're desperate. The silence on the other end was telling. Desperate. Lila's voice had lost some of its honeyed tone. People who are confident in their position don't need to make threatening phone calls. They don't need to stalk social media or try to intimidate new girlfriends. You're scared, aren't you? Scared that Michelle is moving on. Scared that your power over him is slipping away. You have no idea what you're talking about, little girl. Don't I? Caroline felt a surge of confidence, the same feeling she got when she wrote a particularly good poem or nailed a difficult order during the lunch rush. You took his money, but you couldn't take his strength. You broke his trust, but you couldn't break his capacity to love. And now you're watching him build something new with someone who actually values him, and it's killing you. Michelle was staring at her, with something like awe. How sweet, Lila said, but there was strain in her voice now. Young love. But tell me, Caroline, what happens when the novelty wears off? When Michel realizes that you can't give him the life he's accustomed to? When your little poetry dreams crash into his corporate reality, then we'll figure it out, Caroline said simply. Together, like adults who actually care about each other do. Touching, but naive. Michel, when you're ready to have a serious conversation about our future, our financial future, you know how to reach me. Oh, and Caroline, be careful walking home from work. Seattle can be dangerous for young women alone. The line went dead. Caroline and Michel stared at each other in the sudden silence. The last comment had been a threat, thinly veiled but unmistakable. She threatened you, Michel said, his voice shaking with rage. She actually threatened you. She's scared, Caroline repeated, but her own hands were trembling now. People say stupid things when they're scared. This isn't stupid, Caroline. This is dangerous. She knows where you work, probably knows where you live. Michel was pacing again, his anxiety ramping up to levels she'd never seen. I can't let anything happen to you because of my mess. It's not your mess alone anymore, Caroline said firmly. I chose this, remember? I chose you, I chose us, I chose to fight for something worth having. Even if it means dealing with her. Caroline thought about the threat, about the way Lila had said her name like she was cataloguing weaknesses. It was terrifying. But then she thought about Michel's face when he talked about piano music, about the way he listened to her poetry, about the careful way he was learning to trust again. Especially then, Caroline said, because Michel, she's wrong about us. We're not naive, and we're not doomed to fail. We're just two people who found something real in the middle of a lot of chaos. Michel pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. I'm so sorry she threatened you. I'm sorry my past is putting you in danger. We'll handle it, Caroline said into his shoulder. Together. But as they stood there in the break room, holding each other against the storm Lila was determined to create, Caroline couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. Saw your post about Marcus. We need to talk. Coffee tomorrow. Caroline showed the message to Michel, who managed a weak smile. When it rains, it pours. At least Rebecca's not threatening to hurt me. That we know of, Michel muttered. And despite everything, Caroline laughed. One crisis at a time, she said. First Rebecca, then we figure out how to handle Lila. And if I have another anxiety attack in the middle of all this? Caroline pulled back to look at him, her hands framing his face. Then I'll hold your phone, and we'll count to 20 together, and we'll remember that you're stronger than you think you are. Promise? Promise. But as they prepared to face the world outside the break room, Caroline couldn't help but wonder if love would be enough to protect them from the storm that was coming. The coffee shop Rebecca chose was everything Dawn's Brew wasn't. Sterile, overpriced, and full of people taking pictures of their drinks instead of drinking them. Caroline arrived 10 minutes early, claiming a corner table that gave her a clear view of the entrance. Her fingers drummed nervously against her thigh as she rehearsed the conversation she'd been planning since yesterday's phone call with Lila. Some friendships could survive anything. Others had expiration dates written in invisible ink, only visible when the light hit them just right. Rebecca swept in 5 minutes late, her athletic frame draped in the kind of expensive athleisure that screamed lifestyle brand partnership. Her smartwatch glinted as she waved, and her smile was the carefully crafted one Caroline recognized from her Instagram videos. Caroline! Rebecca's voice carried across the cafe, drawing the attention she'd been trained to crave. You look tired, babe. Everything okay? And there it was, the opening shot disguised as concern. Caroline had forgotten how Rebecca could make worry sound like judgment. I've been better, Caroline admitted, watching Rebecca settle into her chair with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to being watched. We need to talk about the post. Which one? The Marcus thing. Rebecca waved dismissively. Oh my God, Caroline, you were so dramatic about that. It was just a cute throwback photo. I thought people would enjoy seeing you happy. You captioned it like we were together, like I was announcing a relationship. Because you looked together. You looked happy and glowing and perfect. Rebecca leaned forward, her expression shifting into the earnest mode she used in her motivational videos. Maybe it was the universe's way of showing you what you could have if you stopped settling. Settling for what? Come on, Caroline. The coffee shop guy, really? Rebecca's voice dropped to the stage whisper she used when delivering hard truths to her followers. He's old, he's got baggage, and he's clearly using you as some kind of rebound therapy. You deserve someone who's actually on your level. Caroline felt heat rise in her chest, the same protective anger that had flared during Lila's phone call. My level. Someone creative. Someone who understands your world. Marcus gets your poetry, your dreams, your artistic soul. Coffee shop guy just sees a pretty waitress who makes him feel better about his midlife crisis. His name is Michelle, and you don't know anything about him. I know enough. Rebecca pulled out her phone, scrolling through what Caroline realized was a compiled research folder. Michael Owen, 32, tech startup founder, recently involved in a messy financial scandal with his ex-girlfriend, worth about $3 million on paper, but most of it's tied up in legal battles. Caroline stared at her friend, former friend, in disbelief. You investigated him? I looked out for you. Caroline, this man is walking red flags, expensive legal problems, trust issues, emotional baggage that could sink a cruise ship. And what does he see in you? A sweet, naive girl who makes him feel stable and uncomplicated. Stop. I'm trying to help you see. Stop. Caroline's voice cut through Rebecca's monologue like a blade. You're not helping me see anything. You're projecting your own insecurities onto my relationship because you can't stand that I found something real with someone who doesn't fit your Instagram aesthetic. Rebecca's perfectly contoured face shifted through several expressions: surprise, hurt, and finally, the cold anger that appeared when her advice was rejected. Real? Caroline, wake up. You've been dating him for what, 2 months? And already his crazy ex is calling you, threatening you. Is that what you call real? Is that what you want your life to look like? How do you know about Lila? The question slipped out before Caroline could stop it, and Rebecca's expression flickered with something that looked like guilt. You told me. Yesterday, remember? When you called about the Marcus thing? But Caroline hadn't called Rebecca yesterday. She'd texted and she hadn't mentioned Lila at all. No, I didn't. Of course you did. You were upset about some phone call. Rebecca, I never called you, and I never mentioned Michelle's ex-girlfriend. Caroline's heart was pounding now, pieces of a puzzle clicking together in ways that made her sick. How do you know about Lila? The silence stretched between them, filled with the coffee shop's ambient noise and the growing weight of realization. I may have done some digging, Rebecca admitted finally. Social media, public records, that kind of thing. I was worried about you. What kind of digging? Just research. To make sure you were safe. Caroline's phone buzzed. A text from Michelle. My lawyer just called. Someone's been asking questions about our case. Private investigator, but they won't say who hired them. Please tell me you're somewhere safe. The blood drained from Caroline's face. Rebecca, what did you do? I hired someone to look into his background. Caroline, you're my best friend. I couldn't just watch you get involved with some sketchy guy without knowing what you were getting into. You hired a private investigator, a very discreet one, and it's a good thing I did because the things they found. You gave my information to a stranger. You told them where I work, where I live, who I'm dating. Caroline's voice was getting louder, and other coffee shop patrons were starting to stare. Rebecca, do you have any idea what you've done? I protected you. You violated my privacy. You put me in danger. Caroline stood up, her chair scraping against the polished concrete floor. Michelle's ex-girlfriend called yesterday and knew exactly where I worked, exactly who I was. I thought she was stalking his social media, but it was your investigator, wasn't it? Feeding information to anyone willing to pay for it. Rebecca's face went pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. That's not... They wouldn't they? Rebecca, you hired someone to investigate a man involved in a messy legal battle with a woman who's already proven she'll do anything for money. What did you think was going to happen? I thought I was helping you make an informed decision. By making decisions for me, by deciding who I should date, who I should love, what I deserve. Caroline gathered her purse, her hands shaking with fury and fear. You want to know what I deserve, Rebecca? I deserve friends who trust me to make my own choices. I deserve friends who support me instead of sabotaging me. I deserve friends who don't hire strangers to spy on my life. Caroline, please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You've been trying to control my narrative since high school, and I've been letting you because I thought that's what friendship looked like. But friends don't destroy each other's relationships. Friends don't put each other in danger, and friends don't decide they know better than you about your own life. Caroline turned to leave, then looked back one more time at the woman who had been her closest friend for over a decade. I hope your followers appreciate the drama you've created, Rebecca, because it's cost you everything else. As Caroline walked out of the coffee shop, her phone rang. Michelle again. Caroline, thank God. Are you okay? My lawyer says... I know who hired the investigator, Caroline said, her voice hollow. It was Rebecca. My best friend hired someone to investigate you, and somehow that information got to Lila. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I'm so sorry, Caroline continued. Michelle, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. No, Michelle's voice was firm. This is not your fault. You couldn't have known your friend would... He trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. Would betray me? Would put us both in danger? Would choose control over trust? Caroline laughed bitterly. Maybe I should have known. Maybe this is who she's always been, and I was just too loyal to see it. Where are you now? Walking back to work. I need to think, and I think better when I'm moving. I'm coming to get you. Don't go to the diner, don't go home, just find somewhere public and safe and wait for me. Michelle, please, Caroline, after yesterday's call, after what we just learned, please just let me come get you. Caroline looked around at the busy Seattle street, at the people hurrying past with their own problems and their own secrets, and realized she'd never felt more alone. Pike Place Market, she said finally. I'll wait by the flower vendors. I'll be there in 15 minutes. As Caroline made her way through the crowded market, surrounded by tourists and locals and the organized chaos of Seattle commerce, she tried to process the magnitude of Rebecca's betrayal. Her oldest friend had hired a stranger to investigate her boyfriend, had violated her privacy, had potentially put her in physical danger, all in the name of protection. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. The worst part was the growing suspicion that Rebecca had enjoyed it. The drama, the control, the opportunity to be the hero of Caroline's story. Caroline's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your friend asked all the right questions. Thanks for the easy payday, L. Lila. Somehow Rebecca's private investigator had led Lila directly to her. Caroline sank onto a bench near the flower stands, surrounded by the beauty and life of the market, and wondered if this was what it felt like when your entire world shifted on its axis. Her phone rang again. Not Michelle this time, but Ruby from the diner. Caroline, honey, you need to know. Someone was here asking questions about you. Said they were from your insurance company, but something felt off. I didn't tell them anything, but I thought you should know. Caroline closed her eyes, feeling the walls of her safe, simple life crumbling around her. The storm Lila had promised was here, and it was bigger than she'd ever imagined. Michael found Caroline sitting among the flower vendors, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. She was hunched over her phone, her box braids creating a curtain that hid her face from the passing crowds. But Michelle could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her free hand drummed anxiously against her thigh. Tap, 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 tap. In the rhythm he'd come to know, meant she was trying not to fall apart. Caroline, he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, and the relief in her dark eyes nearly broke his heart. You came. Of course I came. Michelle sat beside her on the bench, close enough to offer comfort, but not so close as to crowd her in her fragile state. Talk to me. What happened with Rebecca? The story came out in broken pieces. The hired investigator, the violation of privacy, the growing realization that Rebecca had been controlling Caroline's narrative for years. With each detail, Michelle felt his own anger building, not just at Rebecca, but at himself. This is my fault, he said when she finished. If I hadn't gotten involved with you, if I'd kept my distance... Don't. Caroline's voice was sharp. Don't you dare blame yourself for other people's choices. Rebecca chose to hire that investigator. Lila chose to buy the information. You didn't make them do anything. But they're targeting you because of me, because of my mess, my past, Michael. Caroline turned to face him fully, her hands reaching for his. Look at me. This isn't your fault, and it's not mine either. Sometimes terrible people do terrible things, and the only thing we can control is how we respond. Michael studied her face, looking for cracks in her composure, signs that she was putting on a brave front. But what he saw was genuine strength, not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. How are you so calm about this? Caroline laughed, but it wasn't entirely steady. Because falling apart won't help us figure out what to do next. And because, she paused, seeming to search for the right words, because for the first time in my life, I'm not facing something scary alone. The simple statement hit Michelle like a physical blow. When had anyone ever said something like that to him? When had he ever been someone's source of strength instead of someone who needed rescuing? What do we do? He asked. First, we figure out exactly what information they have. Then we figure out how to protect ourselves. And then, Caroline's expression hardened. Then we make sure Lila can't hurt anyone else. Michelle's phone buzzed. His lawyer, David Chen, was calling. Never a good sign on a Thursday afternoon. I have to take this, Michelle said apologetically. Michelle, thank God you answered. David's voice was tight with urgency. We have a problem. Lila's legal team just filed an emergency motion claiming you've been hiding assets. They're saying you've been transferring money to a girlfriend to avoid the settlement. That's insane. I haven't transferred anything to anyone. I know that, and you know that. But they have documentation suggesting otherwise. Bank records, surveillance photos, witness statements about your relationship with Caroline Mitchell. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. They're using Caroline as evidence of financial fraud. It gets worse. They're claiming she's a co-conspirator, that this whole relationship is a scheme to defraud the settlement. Michelle, they could press criminal charges against both of you. Caroline was watching his face, reading the disaster in his expression. How bad? She asked quietly. Bad, Michael managed. To David, he said, what do we do? First, Caroline needs a lawyer. Today. This isn't just about civil court anymore. If they can make any of these charges stick, we're talking about potential jail time. Second, we need to document everything. Every interaction you've had, every financial transaction, every communication. And third, David paused. Third, you might want to consider whether being seen together right now is making things worse. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Caroline reached for Michelle's hand, threading their fingers together. They want us to be scared, she said. They want us to turn on each other, to make their lies look true by acting like we have something to hide. Caroline, if you're implicated in criminal charges, then we fight them. Together. Her grip on his hand tightened. Michelle, I've been poor my whole life. I've worried about money, about debt, about making ends meet, but I've never been dishonest about it. I've never stolen anything, never conspired with anyone, never done anything except serve coffee and write poetry and fall in love with a man who makes me brave. The legal fees alone could bankrupt you. So could backing down. So could letting them win. Caroline stood up, pulling him with her. Michael, what did you tell me about fighting for things that matter? He remembered. In the diner, during one of their quiet morning conversations, she'd been worried about her student loans, about the collection calls that made her screen her phone. He'd told her that some battles were worth the cost, that the things that mattered most always required the biggest risks. I told you that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision to act despite it, Caroline finished. So let's act, let's call the lawyer, let's gather the documentation, let's fight this thing properly, but let's do it together. Michelle looked at this woman, this brave, stubborn, impossibly strong woman, and felt something shift inside his chest. Not just love, though there was plenty of that. Something deeper, recognition, partnership, the feeling of finding someone who would stand with you when the world fell apart. David, Michelle said into the phone, we need 2 lawyers, and we need them today. Michelle, are you sure about this? The smart play is trusting the person I love and fighting for the truth. Set up the meetings. As they walked through Pike Place Market toward Michelle's car, Caroline's phone rang. Ruby's name on the screen. Caroline, honey, where are you? There are people here with badges asking questions about you and Michelle. They say they're from some financial crimes unit. I told them you weren't working today, but they're asking about your schedules, your tips, everything. We're on our way, Caroline said. Don't tell them anything else. After she hung up, Michelle asked, second thoughts? Not even close. Caroline squeezed his hand. But Michelle, when we get through this, and we will get through this, I want to hear you play piano. What? You said you sold your piano for Lila, gave up something you loved to make her happy. When this is over, when she's out of our lives for good, I want to hear you play something beautiful, something that's just yours. Michelle stopped walking, right there in the middle of the crowded market, and kissed her, not gently, not carefully, but with the intensity of someone who had just realized what he was fighting for. I love you, he said against her lips. I love you, and I'm terrified, and I have no idea how we're going to get through this. I love you too, Caroline replied, and we're going to get through it the same way we got through everything else, one day at a time with really good coffee and by being braver than we think we are. As they headed toward the car and whatever legal nightmare awaited them, Caroline felt her phone buzz with one final text from Rebecca. I'm sorry. I know you won't believe me, but I really thought I was protecting you. I never meant for any of this to happen. Caroline showed the message to Michelle, who shook his head. Too little, too late. Maybe, Caroline said, deleting the message without responding, but we're not going to let her regret become our downfall. The storm Lila had promised was here in full force. But for the first time since it started, Caroline wasn't afraid of drowning. She had learned how to swim. The confrontation happened at dawn, in the empty parking lot behind Dawn's Brew. Caroline had arrived early for her shift, needing the familiar rhythm of coffee making and table wiping to steady her nerves before meeting with the lawyers. The past week had been a blur of depositions, document reviews, and sleepless nights spent preparing for a legal battle that felt increasingly surreal. She was unlocking the diner's back door when she heard the footsteps behind her. "Hello, Caroline." Caroline turned slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Lila stood 20 feet away, looking exactly like the social media photos Michelle had shown her, blonde, polished, beautiful, in the way that came from expensive maintenance and practiced angles. But there was something desperate in her blue eyes, something unhinged that the Instagram filters couldn't hide. "You're not supposed to be here," Caroline said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The restraining order is against Michelle, not you." Lila took a step closer, her designer heels clicking against the wet asphalt. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do." "Oh, but we do." Lila's smile was sharp as broken glass. "You see, Caroline, you've become a problem for me, a very expensive problem." Caroline felt for her phone in her pocket, ready to call Michelle or the police or anyone who could help. But Lila noticed the movement. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, not until you hear what I have to say, which is that this whole thing, this legal case, this criminal investigation, this mess that's about to destroy both your lives, it can all go away. Today. Right now." Caroline's fingers stilled on her phone. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about a deal." Lila pulled a folder from her purse, holding it like a weapon. "These are withdrawal papers for all the charges, all the claims, all the legal nightmares that are about to rain down on you and Michelle. All I need is your signature." "My signature on what?" "A statement saying that Michelle did transfer money to you, that you were aware of his intention to hide assets from the settlement, that you participated willingly in financial fraud." The morning air seemed to freeze around them. Caroline stared at the folder like it was a snake waiting to strike. "You want me to lie? I want you to be practical." Lila's voice took on the tone of someone explaining something obvious to a slow child. "Caroline, do you have any idea what criminal charges will do to your life? Your credit, your employment prospects, your future? Even if you win, and that's a big if, you'll be buried in legal debt for the next decade. And if I sign that paper, all charges disappear, against both of you. Michelle keeps his business, you keep your freedom, and I get what I'm entitled to from our relationship." Caroline felt sick. It was elegant, really. The perfect trap. Sign the paper and become a criminal. Don't sign it and face criminal charges anyway. "There's just one catch," Lila continued, her smile widening. "You have to disappear. From Michelle's life, from Seattle, from anywhere he might find you. The deal only works if you're not around to contradict the story later. You want me to confess to a crime I didn't commit and then vanish. I want you to be smart enough to take the exit ramp I'm offering. Because, Caroline, let me be very clear. I will destroy you. I have the money, the lawyers, the connections to make your life a living hell. I can make sure you never work in this city again, never get approved for an apartment, never pass a background check. I can ruin you so completely that Michelle will have no choice but to walk away." The threat hung in the morning air like smoke. Caroline thought about her student loans, her tiny apartment, her job at the diner that barely covered her expenses, everything Lila was threatening to take away. Then she thought about Michelle's face when he talked about piano music, about the way he listened to her poetry, about the careful trust they'd built together, conversation by conversation, confession by confession. "No," Caroline said. "Excuse me?" "I said no. I won't sign your paper. I won't confess to crimes I didn't commit, and I won't disappear from Michelle's life because you can't handle the fact that he moved on." Lila's composure cracked, revealing the rage underneath. "You stupid little girl. Do you think love is going to pay your legal bills? Do you think romance is going to protect you when I'm done with you?" "I think," Caroline said, pulling out her phone, "that you just confessed to extortion, attempted fraud, and criminal conspiracy. And I think I recorded every word of it." Lila's face went white. "You're bluffing." Caroline held up her phone, showing the recording app that had been running since she'd heard footsteps behind her. "Michelle taught me to be prepared for anything. Funny how that advice came in handy. Delete that recording. Delete a confession to multiple felonies. I don't think so." Lila lunged forward, reaching for the phone, but Caroline was faster. She stepped back, already dialing 911 with her thumb. "This is Caroline Mitchell at Dawn's Brew on Pine Street. I need police assistance. Someone just tried to extort me and is now threatening me physically." "You bitch!" Lila snarled, her perfect facade completely gone now. You have no idea what you've just done. I think I do, Caroline said, as sirens began to wail in the distance. I think I just ended your ability to terrorize anyone else. The police arrived within minutes, followed closely by Michelle, who must have gotten Caroline's text and broken several traffic laws getting there. As Lila was read her rights and placed in handcuffs, she looked at Caroline with pure hatred. This isn't over, she said. Yes, Caroline replied calmly. It is. Later, at the police station, as Caroline gave her statement and handed over the recording that would end Lila's legal harassment once and for all, Michelle sat beside her and marveled at the woman he'd fallen in love with. When did you start recording? He asked. The moment I heard her voice. You taught me that Lila always has an agenda, so I figured I should be ready for whatever it was. I can't believe you faced her alone. I wasn't alone, Caroline said, squeezing his hand. I had everything you've taught me about being brave. I had everything we've built together. I had the knowledge that some things are worth fighting for, even when you're scared. Detective Martinez, who had been taking Caroline's statement, looked up from his notepad. Ms. Mitchell, with this recording and Ms. Hayes's threats on tape, we have enough to charge her with extortion, attempted fraud, and violation of the restraining order. Combined with the financial crimes investigation, she's looking at serious jail time. What does that mean for us? Michelle asked. It means the charges against you are being dropped, all of them. Ms. Hayes's attempts to frame you just became evidence of her guilt instead of yours. As they walked out of the police station into the afternoon sunlight, Caroline felt lighter than she had in weeks. The nightmare was over. Lila was going to jail, the charges were dropped, and she and Michelle were free to build their future without the shadow of his past hanging over them. So, Michelle said as they reached his car. What now? Now, Caroline said, pulling him close for a kiss that tasted like freedom and possibility. You buy a piano, and I write poetry about second chances, and the kind of love that makes you braver than you thought you could be. That sounds like the best plan I've ever heard. As they drove away from the police station, Caroline's phone buzzed with a text from Ruby. Heard the good news from Detective Martinez. Your shift is covered today and tomorrow. Go celebrate. Caroline showed the message to Michelle, who laughed, the first genuinely carefree laugh she'd heard from him since they'd met. What should we do with our freedom? He asked. Caroline thought about all the dreams she'd put on hold, all the chances she'd been too scared to take, all the possibilities that stretched ahead of them now that they'd survived the storm. Everything, she said. Let's do everything. And for the first time in either of their lives, everything felt possible. 8 months later, the piano filled half of Michelle's living room, its dark wood gleaming in the afternoon light that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It wasn't the old upright he'd lost. This was a baby grand, purchased not as a replacement, but as a declaration that some things were worth doing right the second time around. Caroline sat curled in the reading chair nearby, her poetry notebook balanced on her knees, listening to Michelle work through a piece by Chopin. His fingers moved across the keys with the careful precision of someone relearning a language he'd once spoken fluently, each note carrying the weight of rediscovered joy. That was beautiful, she said when he finished, looking up from the poem she'd been crafting about the way morning light turned ordinary moments into something sacred. Still rusty, Michelle replied, but he was smiling. The shadows that had lived under his eyes for so long had faded, replaced by the kind of peace that came from sleeping through the night without checking his phone. Rust can be polished away, Caroline said, closing her notebook and moving to sit beside him on the piano bench. Practice makes progress, not perfection. When did you become so wise? I've always been wise. You just taught me to believe it. Michelle's laugh was warm and unguarded. Fair point. He played a few soft chords, something improvised and gentle. How's the blog going? Caroline's poetry blog had launched 3 months ago, growing slowly but steadily as readers discovered her honest, hopeful voice. She'd started posting weekly pieces about love, loss, resilience, and the small miracles hidden in everyday moments. The comments section had become a community of people sharing their own stories of finding strength in unexpected places. Good, really good actually. I got an email yesterday from a small press in Portland. They want to discuss a poetry collection. Michelle's hands stilled on the keys. Caroline, that's incredible. It's just a conversation. Nothing's decided yet. It's not just anything. It's everything you've worked for. Michelle turned to face her fully, his blue eyes bright with pride. Are you going to meet with them? I was thinking about it. Portland's only a few hours' drive. I could go up for the weekend, meet with the editor, see what they have in mind. We could go up for the weekend, Michelle corrected gently, if you want company. I've never been to Portland. The casual way he said "we" still sent warmth through Caroline's chest. 8 months of sharing morning coffee and late-night conversations, of grocery shopping together, and debating what to watch on Netflix. And she still felt a small thrill at being part of a "we" that felt solid and real. I'd like that, she said. Company sounds perfect. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, a text from Ruby. Your boy is here asking for you. Shall I tell him you're living in sin upstairs? Caroline laughed, showing Michelle the message. They'd moved in together 6 weeks ago, after Caroline's lease expired, and Michelle had pointed out that they were spending every night together anyway. The transition had been surprisingly smooth. Michael's minimalist aesthetic softened by Caroline's poetry-covered walls, her plants finding homes among his tech gadgets, their different rhythms settling into a harmony that felt natural. I should head down, Caroline said. Thursday afternoon shift. I'll walk you down. I want to see if Ruby's made any progress with Harold. Harold was the 70-year-old regular who had been flirting with Ruby for 6 months, bringing her flowers from his garden and complimenting her coffee with the dedication of a man who'd found his reason to get up in the morning. Ruby pretended to be annoyed by the attention, but Caroline had caught her checking her reflection in the coffee pot more than once when Harold was expected. The walk to Dawn's Brew took 15 minutes through the Seattle neighborhood that had become home to both of them. Caroline still worked at the diner 3 days a week, not because she needed to financially. Michelle had quietly helped her pay off her student loans, a gift she'd initially refused and eventually accepted with the understanding that it was an investment in their shared future. But because she loved the routine, the customers, the sense of purpose that came from being part of people's daily rituals. Caroline, Ruby's voice carried across the diner as they walked in. Perfect timing. Table 6 wants to hear about your famous lavender scones, and Harold brought me tomatoes from his garden again. That's the 3rd time this week, Caroline observed, tying her apron around her waist. The man has too many tomatoes, Ruby replied, but she was smiling. Michelle kissed Caroline goodbye, a quick, casual gesture that still made her heart skip. See you tonight. I'm making dinner. What are we having? It's a surprise. But I promise it involves actual vegetables and not just coffee for sustenance. As Michelle left, Caroline began her shift with the familiar rhythm that had anchored her life for 3 years. But everything was different now. The weight of financial stress lifted, the future bright with possibility, the present rich with love that had been tested and proven strong. Around 4 o'clock, as the afternoon lull settled over the diner, Caroline's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. For a split second, her heart clenched with old anxiety, but the message wasn't from Lila, who was serving 18 months in minimum security prison and had been banned from contacting either of them. It was from Rebecca. Saw your blog post about forgiveness. It was beautiful. I know I don't deserve a response, but I wanted you to know that I'm in therapy now, working on why I felt the need to control everyone around me. I'm sorry, Caroline, for all of it. I hope you're happy. Caroline read the message twice, then showed it to Ruby, who had appeared beside her with fresh coffee. What do you think? Caroline asked. I think, Ruby said carefully, that some people can change, and some people just learn to hide their damage better. But I also think that's not your problem to figure out anymore. Caroline nodded, tucking her phone away without responding. Rebecca's journey toward self-awareness was something she'd have to navigate alone. Caroline had learned the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, between letting go of anger and opening yourself up to be hurt again. The poetry collection meeting in Portland, Michael's piano filling their living room with music, the small daily miracle of loving someone who loved her back with honesty and kindness. These were the things that mattered now. As her shift ended, and she prepared to head home to whatever surprise dinner Michelle had planned, Caroline caught sight of her reflection in the diner's front window. The woman looking back at her was the same person who had served coffee and written secret poetry 6 months ago, but she was also completely transformed, stronger, braver, more certain of her own worth. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michelle. Dinner is ready when you are, and Caroline, I love you. Caroline smiled, typing back, on my way home, home. The word carried weight now, meaning not just a place but a person, a feeling, a future built on the foundation of 2 people who had chosen to be brave enough to trust again. As she walked through the Seattle evening toward the life she'd built with Michelle, Caroline thought about the poem she'd been working on earlier, Something about the way love could rise from the ashes of old pain, how two broken people could create something whole and beautiful together. She'd finish it tonight after dinner, while Michelle played piano and the city hummed its evening song outside their windows. She'd post it on the blog, add it to the collection she was slowly building. Let it become part of the story she was telling about resilience and hope, and the kind of love that made you more yourself, not less. The poem would be called From Ashes to Sparks, and it would begin like this. Sometimes love arrives disguised as morning coffee, served by steady hands that shake with their own fears. Sometimes it wears a suit and orders the same thing every day, until the day becomes a conversation, the conversation becomes a connection, and the connection becomes the courage to believe that broken people can learn to be whole together. Caroline quickened her pace, eager to get home to Michelle, to dinner, to piano music and poetry, and the beautiful, ordinary miracle of a love that had survived everything the world had thrown at it. Behind her, Dawn's brew glowed warm and welcoming in the evening light, ready to welcome tomorrow's stories, tomorrow's connections, tomorrow's possibilities. And ahead of her, Michelle was waiting with dinner and music, and the promise of all the tomorrows they would write together. She went to hide in tears in a bathroom, and ended up locked up with her millionaire boss. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She knew she shouldn't have answered that call, but she did anyway. Daria Celeste Rivers sat hunched over in the employee restroom of Thorne Pharmaceuticals, her dark brown eyes glistening with unshed tears as her phone buzzed relentlessly against the cold tile floor. The notification glowed mockingly. Rent overdue, $847. Her younger sister's voicemail played on repeat in her mind. Dari, you're always too busy, acting like you're better than all of us now. At 29, Daria had thought she'd have it figured out by now. Her grandmother's gumbo recipe, the sound of jazz drifting from French Quarter windows, the weight of expectations. Everything felt heavy tonight in New Orleans. Humid embrace. She pressed her back against the bathroom stall, her curvy 5'5" frame trembling as she tried to muffle the sob building in her chest. Her fingers found her silver hoops, twisting them nervously, a habit she'd developed in college when money got tight and dreams felt impossible. The bathroom door echoed with approaching footsteps, and Daria quickly wiped her face, hoping whoever it was would just leave, but fate had other plans. The door clicked shut with finality, followed by an unmistakable sound, the lock mechanism jamming. Daria's heart sank as she realized she wasn't alone. Through the gap under the stall door, she could see expensive Italian leather shoes. Great, came a deep, measured voice. Just perfect. Daria recognized that voice instantly. Theodore Ashton Kingsley, Theo to those brave enough to use his nickname, her boss, the CEO, the man whose presence commanded every room he entered. She held her breath, praying he hadn't noticed her. I know someone's in there, Theo said, his tone softer now. The stall doors closed. Defeated, Daria emerged slowly, her tear-stained face meeting the concerned gaze of the most intimidating man in the building. At 6'1", with broad shoulders that filled his navy-tailored suit perfectly, Theo possessed the kind of quiet intensity that made people stop mid-sentence. His dark hair was styled with precision, and his honey-brown eyes held depths she'd never noticed from across conference rooms. Miss Rivers, he said, and she caught something unexpected in his voice, genuine concern. Are you all right? Just peachy, Daria mumbled, attempting to move past him to the door. She turned the handle. Nothing, pushed harder, still nothing. Theo tried the door himself, his jaw tightening as he realized their predicament. The maintenance crew mentioned this lock's been problematic. They stood in awkward silence, the sound of a dripping faucet filling the space between them. Daria's phone buzzed again, another bill notification, and she quickly silenced it. I don't usually, Theo began, then stopped. He loosened his tie slightly, a gesture so human it surprised her. I don't usually hide in bathrooms either. Despite everything, Daria almost smiled. Bad day, you could say that. Theo leaned against the sink, and for the first time since she'd started working here 2 years ago, he looked approachable, vulnerable even. Sometimes the weight of everyone's expectations gets, he gestured vaguely. Heavy, Daria finished, understanding completely. Their eyes met in the mirror's reflection, and something shifted. Here they were, the boss and the receptionist, the millionaire and the woman counting coins for bus fare, equally trapped, equally human. "I take medication," Theo said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper, "for depression. Started after my brother." He stopped, adjusting his watch, a nervous gesture Daria had never noticed before. The confession hung in the air like incense, sacred and surprising. Daria found herself stepping closer, her own walls beginning to crumble. "I have Pinterest boards full of beaches I'll probably never see," she whispered back, "and I listen to H.E.R. on repeat when the world feels too big." Theo's lips curved into the first genuine smile she'd ever seen from him. "I listen to Miles Davis." Same reason. Outside, footsteps echoed in the hallway, but neither of them called for help. Not yet. In this sterile bathroom, under fluorescent lights that should have been unflattering but somehow made everything feel honest, they had found something neither expected. "Do you ever feel like you're drowning?" Daria asked, her voice so soft it barely carried. "Every day," Theo replied, and the weight of his admission settled between them like a bridge. The building's HVAC system hummed to life, filling the silence as they stood there. Two souls who had somehow found each other in the last place either would have looked. And in that moment, Daria realized that sometimes the most unexpected connections happen when you stop trying to be perfect. The maintenance crew found them an hour later, but something had already changed. Daria couldn't stop thinking about the way Theo's voice had cracked when he mentioned his brother, or how his perfectly composed exterior had melted away like sugar in rain. She spent the next morning at her reception desk, stealing glances toward his corner office, remembering the vulnerability in his honey-brown eyes. Her phone buzzed, a text from her sister Brielle. "Still too good to call your family back?" Daria's fingers found her silver hoops again, twisting them as she typed and deleted 3 different responses. At 22, Brielle had their grandmother's fire and none of Daria's patience for diplomacy. Her sister's Instagram stories flashed across her mind. Late nights, new friends, the kind of freedom Daria had traded for responsibility years ago. "Good morning, Ms. Rivers?" Theo's voice made her look up sharply. He stood at her desk in another impeccable suit, but she could see the tiny details now, the way he pressed his lips together when thinking, how his left hand absently adjusted his watch when he was uncertain. "Mr. Kingsley," she replied, professional mask sliding into place. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly, "for last night, and to apologize if I made you uncomfortable with my candidness." Daria studied his face, seeing the CEO trying to rebuild walls that had already fallen. "You didn't make me uncomfortable." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the busy lobby faded away. Theo's expression softened, and she caught a glimpse of the man from the bathroom, raw, real, beautifully imperfect. "Coffee?" he asked suddenly. "I mean, would you like to get coffee? Not as—" He gestured between his suit and her desk. "Just as two people who got locked in a bathroom together." Daria's heart did something complicated in her chest. Yes, but I can't leave the desk until—" "Lunch break," Theo said quickly. "Café Luna, on Magazine Street, if you want." After he walked away, Daria sat stunned. Theo Kingsley had just asked her to coffee. Not the CEO asking his employee, the man asking the woman who'd seen him cry. The morning crawled by. Daria fielded calls and scheduled appointments while checking her bank balance obsessively. Coffee meant spending money she didn't have, but the alternative, sitting in the break room eating a peanut butter sandwich while wondering, what if, felt worse. At noon, she found Theo at a corner table in Café Luna, looking uncharacteristically nervous. He'd loosened his tie and rolled his sleeves, making him seem younger, more approachable. When he saw her, relief flooded his features. "You came," he said, standing to pull out her chair. "You doubted I would?" "I doubted my sanity for asking." His smile was self-deprecating. "I don't exactly have experience with—" He gestured vaguely. "Normal human interaction?" Daria teased, settling into her seat. "Something like that." Theo signaled the waitress. "What would you like?" Daria scanned the menu, calculating. The cheapest option was still $8, money she needed for the bus tomorrow. "Just coffee, black." "Are you sure? Their jambalaya's supposed to be incredible." "Coffee's perfect," she insisted, hating how her financial reality intruded on this moment. Theo studied her face, and she saw the exact moment he understood. Instead of pushing, he ordered coffee for both of them and asked the waitress to surprise them with whatever she recommended. "I can't," Daria started. "It's my suggestion," Theo said gently. "My treat." They sat in awkward silence until their drinks arrived, followed by beignets neither had ordered, but both were grateful for. Daria bit into the powdered sugar heaven and couldn't suppress a small moan of appreciation. "Good?" Theo asked, and there was something almost tender in his voice. "Amazing. I haven't had beignets since—" She paused, remembering. "Since I was a kid. My grandmother used to take me and Brielle to Café du Monde every Sunday after church." "Tell me about her, your grandmother." And suddenly Daria was talking about Sunday gumbo dinners, about learning to braid hair on the front porch, about the woman who taught her that dignity wasn't about what you owned, but how you carried yourself. Theo listened with an intensity that made her feel heard, really heard, for the first time in years. "What about your family?" she asked eventually. Theo's expression clouded. "My parents have been married 42 years. They're formidable. Old New Orleans money, expectations that could crush diamonds." He paused, adjusting his watch. "My brother Marcus was the golden child, charming, effortless, everything I'm not. Was. Car accident. 3 years ago." Theo's voice was steady, but his knuckles were white around his coffee cup. "I've been trying to fill his shoes ever since, but they never quite fit." Daria reached across the table instinctively, covering his hand with hers. "Maybe you're not supposed to fill them. Maybe you're supposed to walk your own path." Theo looked down at their joined hands, and something shifted in his expression. "When did you become so wise?" "Poverty's a hell of a teacher." They talked until the afternoon shift change, sharing stories and silences with equal comfort. When Theo walked her back to the office, Daria felt lighter than she had in months, until she saw her phone. 3 missed calls from Brielle, 1 voicemail. "Dari, I'm at the emergency room. Don't freak out, but I need you." The coffee warmth evaporated instantly. Daria's hands shook as she called back, Theo watching with concern as her face went pale. "Brielle, what happened? Are you okay?" I'm fine, came her sister's voice, a weak but defiant. "Just, can you come? Please." Daria hung up, already calculating bus routes and praying her sister hadn't done something irreversibly stupid. "What's wrong?" Theo asked. "My sister's in the hospital. I have to go. I'll drive you." "You don't have to." "Daria." The sound of her first name in his voice stopped her cold. "Let me help." And as they rushed toward his car, a sleek sedan that probably cost more than she made in 2 years, Daria realized that letting people help wasn't always about weakness. Sometimes it was about trust. Sorisiva Calfium, the emergency room smelled like disinfectant and desperation, familiar scents that reminded Daria of too many childhood visits. She found Brielle in bed 7, looking smaller than her 22 years, her usually vibrant braids hanging limp around her shoulders, dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her left wrist was wrapped in a splint. "Don't say it," Brielle said, before Daria could speak. "Say what?" "That I'm irresponsible. That I should have called sooner. That you're disappointed." Brielle's voice cracked on the last word. Daria sank into the plastic chair beside the bed, exhaustion hitting her like a wave. "What happened, Brie?" "Stupid bike accident. Trying to impress some guy." Brielle's laugh was bitter. "Broke my wrist, bruised my ribs, and my pride's somewhere in the gutter on Bourbon Street." "Are you—" "The doctors want to keep me overnight for observation." "Something about potential concussion." Brielle finally looked at her sister. "I know you don't have the money for this. The insurance barely covers anything, and I lost my job last week." Daria's heart sank. Another bill she couldn't afford, another crisis to navigate. She twisted her silver hoops, mind racing through impossible calculations. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Theo stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable but determined, holding 2 cups of coffee and a bag from the hospital cafeteria. "I thought you might need—" He trailed off, taking in Brielle's suspicious stare. "Who's this?" Brielle asked, her voice sharp with protective instinct. "This is Theo," Daria said carefully. "My boss." "Your boss brought you coffee at the hospital?" Brielle's eyebrows shot up. "Damn, Daria, what kind of job you got?" "Brielle," Daria warned, embarrassment heating her cheeks. Theo stepped forward, extending his hand. "Theodore Kingsley, and you must be the sister who keeps Daria on her toes." Despite herself, Brielle smiled. "Brielle Rivers. And yeah, somebody's got to keep her from being too perfect all the time." "I can see the family resemblance," Theo said, settling into another chair. "Same stubborn chin." "Hey!" Both sisters protested simultaneously, then looked at each other and laughed. The first genuine moment they'd shared in months. The next few hours passed in a strange bubble. Theo proved surprisingly good at hospital small talk, making Brielle laugh with stories about his own emergency room visits, a childhood broken arm from trying to climb the family's oak tree, stitches from a teenage surfing accident in California. "Can you surf?" Brielle asked, clearly intrigued. "Used to, haven't been on a board in years." Theo's expression grew wistful. "My brother and I used to drive out to the Gulf every weekend, convinced we were going to be professional surfers." "What stopped you?" "Life, expectations, the family business." He shrugged. "Sometimes you wake up one day and realize you're living someone else's dream." Daria watched this exchange with growing amazement. Theo was being normal, talking to her sister like they were old friends, making her laugh when she should have been in pain. When was the last time someone had shown up for her family like this? Around midnight, a doctor finally appeared with discharge papers. Brielle would be fine. Minor concussion, sprained wrist, bruised ego. But the bill made Daria's stomach drop. $2,847 for the emergency room visit, with insurance covering less than half. She stepped into the hallway to process this financial catastrophe. Phone calculator open, trying to figure out which essential bill she could skip to make room for this new crisis. "It's a lot," Theo said quietly, appearing beside her. "I'll figure it out," Daria said automatically. The response burned into her DNA by years of making do. "Let me..." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "I appreciate everything you've done tonight. I really do. But I can't. I won't be someone's charity case." Theo was quiet for a long moment. "What if it wasn't charity?" "What do you mean?" "We need someone to coordinate the employee wellness program. It's legitimate work, 20 hours a week, flexible schedule, pays enough to..." He gestured toward the bill in her hands. Daria stared at him. "You're making up a job for me. I'm offering you an opportunity. There's a difference, is there?" Before Theo could answer, Brielle appeared in the doorway, hospital gown replaced by her street clothes, ripped jeans, oversized sweatshirt, sneakers that had seen better days. "Ready to go?" she asked, then caught the tension between them. "Did I interrupt something?" "No," Daria said quickly. "We're done here." The ride home was quiet, Brielle dozing against the window while Daria stared out at the city lights. Theo didn't push, didn't try to convince her, just drove through the New Orleans night with jazz playing softly on the radio. When they reached Daria's apartment building, a converted shotgun house in a neighborhood gentrification hadn't quite reached, Theo helped Brielle up the narrow stairs while Daria fumbled with her keys. "Thank you," Daria said at the door, meaning it. "For everything tonight." "It's what friends do," Theo replied, and the word friends hung between them like a question neither was ready to answer. After he left, Daria helped Brielle settle on the couch, bringing her pain medication and an ice pack for her wrist. "He likes you," Brielle said out of nowhere. "He's my boss." "That's not what I said." Brielle studied her sister's face. "And you like him too?" "It's complicated. The best things usually are." Brielle adjusted the ice pack. "He seems different from what I expected." "Different how?" "I don't know. Real, I guess. Rich guys are usually all flash and no substance, but he sat in a hospital for 4 hours just because you needed him to." Daria thought about that as she finally fell into bed at 2 a.m. Theo hadn't tried to fix everything with money, though he'd offered. He'd simply shown up, stayed present, made her sister laugh when she needed it most. But accepting his help meant crossing a line she'd drawn years ago, the line between independence and dependence, between dignity and desperation, and she wasn't sure she was ready to find out what waited on the other side. The wellness program coordinator position was real. Daria discovered this Monday morning when HR called with official paperwork, benefit details, and a start date. 20 hours a week, flexible scheduling, and a salary that would cover Brielle's hospital bill with enough left over to buy groceries without counting every dollar. She stared at the offer letter, Theo's words echoing in her mind. "It's what friends do." Friends. The word felt dangerous, loaded with possibilities she wasn't sure she could afford, emotionally or otherwise. At lunch, she found herself at Café Luna again, this time alone with her thoughts and a coffee she could actually afford. Her phone buzzed with a text from Brielle. "Physical therapy sucked, but the therapist was cute. How's the mysterious job offer?" Before she could respond, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mind if I sit?" Theo stood beside her table, looking less polished than usual. His tie was loosened, hair slightly mussed, and there were shadows under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "Bad morning?" Daria asked, as he settled across from her. Board meeting. They're pushing for expansion into Southeast Asia, and he rubbed his temples. I'm not sure I'm the right person to lead it. Why not? Because every time I look at those projections, all I can think about is how Marcus would have handled it. He was the one who was good with people, who could walk into a room and make everyone believe in the impossible. Daria watched him adjust his watch, that nervous habit she was beginning to recognize, and felt something shift inside her chest. Maybe that's your problem, she said quietly. What do you mean? You're trying to be Marcus instead of being Theo. She leaned forward. What would you do differently if you weren't worried about living up to someone else's legacy? Theo was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. I'd focus on the workers, the people in those factories, their families, their communities. Marcus always looked at the big picture, but he paused. I see the details, the individual faces behind the numbers. That sounds like exactly the right person to lead an expansion. When Theo looked up, his honey-brown eyes were bright with something that might have been hope. Yeah, you really think so? I think you're not giving yourself enough credit. They sat in comfortable silence, and Daria found herself studying his face, the strong jaw softened by uncertainty, the way his mouth curved when he was thinking, the laugh lines that suggested he hadn't always been this serious. About the job offer, she said finally. Theo's expression became carefully neutral. You don't have to. I want to accept it, but I need you to understand something. She twisted her silver hoops, gathering courage. I can't be your project, your good deed, your way of feeling better about having money when I don't. That's not. Let me finish. Daria's voice was steady but firm. If we're going to do this, work together, be friends, come whatever this is, it has to be real, equal, not you rescuing me and me being grateful. Theo nodded slowly. What would equal look like? Honest. No more job offers when I'm in crisis. No paying for things without asking. And if you're having a bad day, you tell me instead of pretending everything's perfect. Deal, Theo said immediately. But I have conditions too, such as, if you need help, real help, not just money, you ask for it. And you stop twisting your earrings every time you're stressed, because it makes me want to fix whatever's wrong. And apparently I'm not allowed to do that anymore. Despite herself, Daria smiled. You notice that? I notice everything about you, Theo said, then looked surprised by his own admission. The words hung between them, charged with meaning neither was quite ready to explore. Daria felt heat rise in her cheeks, and for a moment, the cafe faded away. I should get back, she said, standing abruptly. Daria, wait. Theo caught her hand as she passed his chair. I meant what I said, about noticing you, not just the earrings. She looked down at their joined hands, his pale and soft from a life of ease, hers darker and calloused from years of making do. The contrast should have emphasized their differences, but instead, it felt like they fit together. This is dangerous, she whispered. I know. We work together. You're my boss. I know that too. And I can't afford to lose my job over whatever this is. Theo's thumb brushed across her knuckles, gentle and sure. Then we'll be careful. Walking back to the office, Daria felt like she was balancing on a tightrope. Every rational part of her brain screamed warnings. Don't mix business with pleasure. Don't date your boss. Don't fall for someone whose monthly car payment was more than your yearly salary. But her heart was writing a different story, one where a man showed up at hospitals and noticed nervous habits and looked at her like she was worth noticing. That afternoon, she signed the wellness coordinator contract and moved her few belongings to a small office down the hall from Theo's. The space was modest but hers, a desk, a computer, a window overlooking the street. She was arranging her supplies when her phone rang. Brielle's contact photo filled the screen, a selfie from last Christmas, both sisters laughing at something Daria couldn't remember now. How's the new job? Brielle asked without preamble. Good, different, still figuring it out. And the boss? Daria glanced toward Theo's office, where she could see him through the glass walls, head bent over paperwork, completely absorbed. Still my boss, she said carefully. But nothing. It's just a job, Brie. Brielle's disbelief was audible. Well, just remember, the heart wants what it wants, but the brain's got to live with the consequences. After hanging up, Daria sat in her new office, watching Theo work. He'd removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and she could see the concentration in his posture, the way he occasionally ran his fingers through his hair when frustrated. Her phone buzzed with an email from him. Dinner tomorrow? To discuss wellness program strategies. Somewhere with jambalaya this time. She typed back, Is this business or personal? His response came immediately. Does it matter? And sitting there in her new office, watching the man who'd held her hand in a cafe that afternoon, Daria realized that maybe it didn't matter at all. Maybe what mattered was that for the first time in years, someone was asking her to dinner, not because they felt sorry for her, but because they wanted her company. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The restaurant Theo chose wasn't what Daria expected. Instead of the upscale establishments she'd imagined him frequenting, he led her to a small Creole place in the Bywater, where locals ate at mismatched tables, and the jambalaya came with cornbread that melted in your mouth, the kind of place she would have picked if she'd been the one choosing. "How did you know about this place?" she asked, settling into a wooden chair that had seen better decades. "Marcus brought me here once," Theo admitted, adjusting his watch, though she noticed he did it less frequently now. "Said the best food came from places that didn't need to impress anybody." Smart man, he was. Theo's smile was soft, tinged with sadness, but no longer sharp with pain. "Yeah, he would have liked you. Yeah? He had a thing for people who called him out on his bullshit." Theo's grin turned mischievous. "You definitely would have called him out." Their conversation flowed easier than jambalaya off a spoon. Daria found herself laughing at Theo's stories about board meetings gone wrong, while he listened intently as she described her plans for the wellness program, mental health workshops, stress management seminars, resources for employees struggling with financial anxiety. "You really think people will come," Theo asked, "to talk about mental health at work? If you create a safe space, they will. Most people are drowning in silence, pretending everything's fine when it's not." She paused, remembering their bathroom conversation. "Sometimes all it takes is one person being honest first." Theo's honey-brown eyes held hers across the table. "Is that what we're doing, being honest?" The question carried weight beyond its words. Daria felt her pulse quicken, aware they were approaching something that couldn't be taken back. "I don't know," she said quietly. "Thais, what would honest look like?" "Honest would be me admitting that I haven't stopped thinking about you since that night we got locked up together, that I've been looking forward to this dinner all week, and not because I care about wellness program strategies." Daria's breath caught. "Theo, honest would be telling you that when you smile, really smile, not the polite one you use at work, it makes me forget about board meetings and profit margins and all the reasons I'm supposed to be miserable. We can't what? Can't admit there's something here." Theo leaned forward. "Because I'm your boss, because I have money, and you don't, because people will talk. All of those things." Daria twisted her silver hoops, then caught herself and stopped. "This is my career, Theo, my livelihood. I can't risk it for what? For something that might not be real." Theo was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "What would make it real for you?" The question surprised her. She'd expected him to argue, to minimize her concerns, to use his privilege to bulldoze past her hesitations. Instead, he was asking what she needed. "Time," she said finally, "and space to figure out who we are when we're not boss and employee, when there's no crisis throwing us together, no dramatic moments making everything feel more intense than it is." Okay. You want time and space? You've got it." Theo signaled for the check. "But I have one condition." "What's that?" "No pretending this conversation didn't happen. No going back to purely professional small talk and pretending you don't feel this too." Daria's heart hammered against her ribs. "I feel it." "Good." Theo's smile was soft, genuine. "Then we'll take this slow. Figure it out as we go." The drive back to her apartment was quiet but not uncomfortable. Theo's playlist had shifted from jazz to something softer, John Legend, H.E., to artists who understood the complexity of wanting something you weren't sure you could have. "Thank you," Daria said, as he walked her to her door. "For dinner, for understanding why this is complicated. Thank you for being honest about what you need." Theo paused at the bottom of her steps. "See you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow." But as she watched him drive away, Daria realized tomorrow had become loaded with new possibilities. How do you work alongside someone who's just confessed to thinking about you constantly? How do you maintain professional boundaries when you've admitted to feeling something too? Inside her apartment, she found Brielle on the couch, binge-watching reality TV with her injured wrist propped on a pillow. "How was the business dinner?" Brielle asked without looking away from the screen. "Complicated. The good kind or the bad kind?" Daria sank onto the couch beside her sister. "Both." "Ah." Brielle muted the TV and turned to face her. "He told you he likes you. How did you—" "Please. The man looked at you like you hung the moon when we were at the hospital. What did you tell him?" "That we need to take it slow. Figure out what this is without the pressure of working together. Smart, Brielle nodded approvingly. And scary as hell, right? Terrifying. Good. The best things usually are. Brielle reached over and squeezed Daria's hand. For what it's worth, I think he's good for you. Why? Because you're smiling, like, really smiling. Haven't seen that in a while. That night, lying in bed, Daria replayed every moment of the evening. Theo's confession, the way his eyes had held hers, the gentle understanding in his voice when she'd asked for time. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Sweet dreams, Daria. Thank you for a perfect evening." She typed back, "Thank you for being patient with my complicated heart." His response came immediately. "Your heart isn't complicated. It's careful. There's a difference." And as she drifted off to sleep, Daria realized that maybe being careful wasn't the same as being afraid. Maybe it was just being smart enough to protect something that might turn out to be worth protecting. The thought both thrilled and terrified her, but for the first time in years, the thrill was winning. Working with Theo after their dinner conversation proved to be an exquisite form of torture. Daria became hyper-aware of everything. The way he said good morning with just a hint of warmth that wasn't quite professional, how his gaze lingered on her face during meetings, the careful distance he maintained when passing documents that ensured their fingers wouldn't accidentally brush. 2 weeks into their unspoken agreement to take things slow, the tension was becoming unbearable. "Sirs, you're driving yourself crazy," Brielle observed, watching Daria pace their small living room while venting about her day, and probably him too. "We agreed to keep things professional." "Professional doesn't mean pretending you're both robots." Brielle adjusted the pillow under her healing wrist. "When's the last time you two had an actual conversation about something other than work?" Daria couldn't answer because she knew Brielle was right. In their effort to maintain boundaries, she and Theo had created a sterile buffer zone that was sucking all the warmth out of their interactions. The next morning, she found Theo in his office early, staring out the window with his coffee growing cold. He looked tired, stressed, and utterly alone. "Bad night?" she asked from the doorway. He turned, and his expression shifted from surprise to something softer. "Couldn't sleep. You?" "Same." She stepped into his office, closing the door behind her. "We need to talk. About how we're both miserable trying to pretend we don't care about each other." Theo's smile was rueful. "Is it that obvious? Yesterday you called me Ms. Rivers in an email about wellness program snacks. We've moved past Ms. Rivers, Theo, have we?" The question hung between them, and Daria realized they were at a crossroads. They could keep pretending to be nothing more than colleagues, or they could figure out how to be honest about their feelings while maintaining their professional responsibilities. "I miss talking to you," she said quietly. "Really talking, like we did at dinner. I miss it too." Theo stood, moving closer but stopping just outside her personal space. "But I don't want to pressure you or make you uncomfortable at work." "What if we made rules?" Daria suggested. "Clear boundaries that let us be us, without compromising either of our careers." "What kind of rules?" "At work, we're professional, colleagues. But after hours," she paused, gathering courage, "after hours, we're just Daria and Theo, two people getting to know each other." Theo's eyes searched her face. "And if it doesn't work out, if we try this and it goes badly, then we handle it like adults." "But Theo," she stepped closer, close enough to catch his cologne, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his honey-brown eyes. "What if it does work out?" Before he could answer, a knock interrupted them. Theo's assistant appeared in the doorway, looking flustered. "Mr. Kingsley, the board members are here early for the 10 o'clock meeting." Reality crashed back in. Daria stepped away quickly, professional mask sliding into place. "I should go prepare the wellness presentation." "Daria," Theo called as she reached the door. "Tonight, coffee, just to talk." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and escaped to her office with her heart racing. The day crawled by. Daria threw herself into work, finalizing wellness program materials and scheduling employee information sessions. But every time she passed Theo's office, every time she heard his voice in the hallway, her pulse quickened. At 6 o'clock, she found him waiting by the elevator, jacket slung over his shoulder, looking younger without the formal business armor. "Ready for that coffee?" he asked. They ended up at a different cafe this time, one in the Garden District, where tourists and locals mingled over café au lait and conversations that stretched into the evening. Daria felt the artificial tension of the day dissolving as they talked, really talked, for the first time in weeks. Tell me something I don't know about you, Theo said, stirring sugar into his coffee. I wanted to be a teacher, Daria admitted. Elementary school. I was 3 semesters away from my degree when my grandmother got sick and I had to drop out to take care of her. Do you regret it? No. Those last months with her were precious, but sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd finished. You could still finish, Theo said quietly. The program I'm proposing, it's essentially educational work. Employee development, training seminars. If you wanted to go back to school, Theo, Daria's voice carried a warning. What? I'm not offering to pay for it. I'm just saying the company has tuition assistance programs for professional development. That's actually thoughtful. I can be thoughtful when I'm not overthinking everything. His smile was self-deprecating. Your turn. Ask me something. What scares you most? The question surprised him. She could see it in the way his expression shifted, became more guarded. Besides the obvious. Besides losing another person I care about. Daria nodded. Becoming my father, Theo said finally. Cold, calculating, measuring everything by profit margins. I see it happening sometimes, in board meetings, when I make decisions based on numbers instead of people. It terrifies me. Then don't become him. It's not that simple, isn't it? Daria leaned forward. Every day you choose who you want to be. Every decision is a chance to be different. They talked until the cafe started closing, staff stacking chairs and mopping floors around them. Walking to Theo's car, Daria felt lighter than she had in weeks. This was nice, she said, as he opened her door. It was. Theo paused before closing it. Same time tomorrow. Are we dating? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Theo considered this seriously. Are we? I don't know. What would dating look like for us? Honest conversations, shared meals, getting to know each other without the pressure of figuring out our entire future. He smiled, taking it slow, like you said. Okay, let's date. Carefully, thoughtfully. But let's see where this goes. Theo's smile could have powered half of New Orleans. I'd like that very much. The drive to her apartment was filled with comfortable silence and the kind of nervous energy that comes with new beginnings. When he walked her to her door, they both hesitated on the steps. So, Daria said, do we shake hands? Hug? What's the protocol for the end of a first official date? I was hoping, Theo said, stepping closer, that protocol could go to hell for just a minute. His hand cupped her cheek gently, thumb brushing across her skin as he leaned down. The kiss was soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. Daria answered by rising on her toes, her hands finding the lapels of his shirt. When they broke apart, both were breathing unsteadily. That was, Daria began. Perfect, Theo finished. I was going to say dangerous. Same thing. Inside her apartment, Brielle took one look at Daria's face and grinned. Well, look who finally stopped overthinking long enough to let herself be happy. We're taking it slow, Daria protested, touching her lips where she could still feel the warmth of Theo's kiss. How slow we talking? Because that smile says you're already halfway gone. And lying in bed that night, replaying every moment of the evening, Daria realized Brielle might be right. She was falling for Theodore Ashton Kingsley, and for the first time in her life, the fall felt like flying. 3 weeks of careful dating turned Daria's world upside down in the most beautiful way. She discovered that Theo was funny, genuinely, surprisingly funny, with a dry wit that caught her off guard and made her laugh until her sides hurt. That he was thoughtful in small ways, remembering she preferred her coffee with cream, that her sister was left-handed and might need ergonomic tools as her wrist healed, that Fridays were hard because that's when all the bills came due. She learned he had insomnia, often texting her at midnight with random thoughts or funny memes he'd found, that he'd kept every letter his brother had written from college, that he played piano, beautifully, sadly, when he thought no one was listening. You're glowing, her co-worker Marissa observed one Thursday morning. Like, literally glowing. What's your secret? Daria tried to deflect, but the truth was written all over her face. For the first time in years, she was happy, really, genuinely happy. Their relationship existed in careful compartments, professional colleagues during work hours, something deeper and more real in the evenings. Coffee dates became dinner dates, which became long walks through the French Quarter, talking about everything and nothing. But it was the quiet moments that undid her, the way Theo looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. How he listened, really listened, when she talked about her dreams, her fears, her complicated relationship with money and independence. "I want to show you something," he said one Friday evening as they finished dinner at their usual spot in the Bywater. Instead of driving toward her apartment, Theo headed toward the warehouse district. He pulled up in front of a converted building, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. "What is this?" Daria asked as he led her inside. "My place," Theo said, suddenly nervous. "I've been wanting to invite you over, but I wasn't sure." The elevator opened onto a loft that took Daria's breath away. The space was enormous, but somehow cozy, filled with comfortable furniture, books everywhere, and art that looked like it had been chosen for love rather than status. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the Mississippi River. "Theo," she breathed, "this is beautiful." "It doesn't feel like home yet," he admitted, watching her explore. "Too big, too quiet. But I thought, maybe you'd help me make it feel less empty." The vulnerability in his voice made her turn around. He stood in the center of his beautiful, lonely space, hands in his pockets, looking like he was afraid she might bolt. "What are you asking?" she said softly. "I'm asking if you want to stay, tonight. Not because I expect anything," he added quickly. "Just because I sleep better when you're around, and I thought maybe you might want to see what Saturday morning looks like from here." Daria's heart did something complicated in her chest. They'd been taking things slow, building trust and connection, but this felt like stepping across a threshold she couldn't uncross. "I don't have anything with me," she said. "I have an extra toothbrush, a drawer full of clean t-shirts." His smile was tentative. "Unless you're not ready, I understand if—" "Theo," he stopped talking, waiting. "Show me the view." They stood at the windows as the sun set over New Orleans, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that rivaled any Pinterest board. Theo's arm came around her shoulders, and Daria let herself lean into his warmth. "My grandmother would have loved this," she said quietly. "Tell me about her." So Daria talked about Sunday dinners and life lessons shared over gumbo, about a woman who raised 2 girls on a housekeeper's salary and somehow made them feel rich in all the ways that mattered. Theo listened with the kind of attention that made her feel heard, understood, valued. "She sounds incredible," he said when she finished. She used to say that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone who made you want to be better. Smart woman. Theo's fingers traced gentle patterns on her shoulder. "Do I make you want to be better?" Daria turned in his arms, studying his face in the fading light. "You make me want to be brave." "Brave enough for what?" "This." She reached up, framing his face with her hands. "Brave enough to fall for someone who could break my heart. Brave enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, fairy tales can happen to girls like me." Theo's kiss was different this time. Deeper, more certain. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "Girls like you deserve every fairy tale ever written," he whispered. They spent the evening curled on his massive couch, talking and kissing and slowly, carefully, learning each other. When Theo finally led her to his bedroom, it was with the kind of reverence that made Daria feel precious, cherished. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice rough with want and restraint. "I'm sure," she whispered back, and meant it. They made love like they'd been building toward this moment for months, slowly, tenderly, with the kind of connection that went deeper than physical desire. Afterward, Daria lay in Theo's arms, listening to his heartbeat, feeling like she'd found something she didn't even know she'd been looking for. "What are you thinking?" Theo asked, fingers threading through her hair. "That I'm in trouble. Good trouble or bad trouble? The kind where there's no going back." She tilted her head to look at him. "I'm falling in love with you, Theodore Ashton Kingsley." His sharp intake of breath told her everything she needed to know before he spoke. "I fell for you the night we got locked in that bathroom," he said. "Everything since then has just been me trying to catch up to my heart." Saturday morning from Theo's loft was everything he'd promised. Golden light streaming through massive windows, coffee that tasted like heaven, and jazz drifting up from the street below. Daria wore one of his t-shirts and nothing else, and felt more beautiful than she had in her entire life. "I have to tell you something," Theo said, as they lingered over breakfast. Daria's stomach clenched. "What?" "My parents want to meet you." "What?" The fork slipped from her fingers. "How do they even know about me?" "Because I told them." Theo reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Because I'm tired of keeping the best thing in my life a secret." "Theo, I can't." Daria gestured at herself, at his apartment, at the vast differences between their worlds. "Your parents are going to take one look at me and know I don't belong." "You belong with me," Theo said firmly. "That's all that matters." But as Daria looked around his beautiful loft, reality came crashing back. Meeting his parents meant stepping fully into his world, with all the judgment and scrutiny that came with it, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that level of exposure. Not yet. Meeting the Kingsley family felt like preparing for battle. Daria stood in front of her tiny closet the following Friday, every outfit looking wrong for dinner at the commander's palace with New Orleans royalty. Too casual, too cheap, too obviously borrowed from Brielle's wardrobe. "You're spiraling," Brielle observed from the bed, watching her sister's fashion crisis unfold. "I'm being realistic." Daria held up a black dress that had seen better days. "These people probably spend more on wine than I make in a month. So they're going to take one look at me and wonder what their son sees in the help." Brielle sat up, her expression serious. "Listen to me, Dari. Theo chose you, not some debutante with a trust fund, not some society princess with the right last name. You, the woman who makes him laugh, who challenges him, who makes him want to be better. But what if nothing?" Brielle stood, moving to the closet. "You're Daria Rivers. You're brilliant, kind, funny, and you've worked for everything you have. If his parents can't see that, it's their loss." An hour later, Daria stood outside Commander's palace in the navy dress she'd finally settled on. Simple, elegant, borrowed from a co-worker who was roughly her size. Theo waited by the entrance, devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "You look beautiful," he said, taking her hand. "I look terrified." "That too." His smile was gentle. "Sure they're going to love you." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I love you." The words hung between them, finally spoken in daylight, without the cover of passion or darkness. Daria's heart stopped, then started again at double time. "Theo, I know it's fast. I know we said we'd take things slow, but I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is anything less than complete, terrifying, life-changing love." Before she could respond, the restaurant door opened and a couple emerged who could only be Theo's parents. His father was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and Theo's honey-brown eyes. His mother was elegant in the way that money and breeding could create: perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive jewelry, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Theodore," so his mother said, kissing his cheek, "you look well." "Mom, Dad, I'd like you to meet Daria Rivers." Theo's hand found the small of her back, a gesture of support and claim. "Daria, these are my parents, Richard and Celeste Kingsley." "Mr. and Mrs. Kingsley," Daria said, extending her hand. "It's wonderful to meet you." Richard's handshake was firm, his smile genuine. "Please, call me Richard. Theo's told us so much about you." Celeste's greeting was cooler, her assessment barely disguised as she took in Daria's appearance, her dress, her accent. "How lovely. Shall we go in?" Dinner was a minefield of careful conversation and loaded questions. Richard proved to be warm and engaging, asking about Daria's work with genuine interest. Celeste was more subtle, her inquiries seeming innocent, while clearly designed to establish social positioning. "Where did you attend university, dear?" Celeste asked over the soup course. "I didn't finish," Daria replied honestly. "Family circumstances required me to leave school." "Oh, how unfortunate. What field were you studying?" "Education. I wanted to teach elementary school." "How noble." The word carried just enough condescension to sting. "And your family? Are they from New Orleans?" "Born and raised. My grandmother worked for the Belmont family for 30 years. Daria watched understanding dawn in Celeste's eyes, the recognition that Daria came from the serving class, not the served. The woman's smile became even more artificial. "I see. How interesting." Under the table, Theo's hand found Daria's, squeezing gently, but she could feel him tensing beside her, recognizing his mother's tone. "Daria's wellness program at the company has been revolutionary," Theo interjected. "Employee satisfaction is up 20%, and we've seen a significant decrease in sick days and turnover." "Wonderful," Richard said enthusiastically. "It's about time someone focused on the human element of business." "Indeed," Celeste agreed, though her expression suggested she found such concerns beneath notice. "And tell me, Daria, what are your intentions regarding my son?" The question landed like a slap. The entire table went silent, other diners, conversations filling the void. "Mom," Theo warned, his voice low and dangerous. "It's a fair question, Theodore. You've never brought a woman to meet us before." Daria felt every eye in the restaurant on their table, or maybe that was just her paranoia. Either way, she was drowning in the weight of expectation and judgment. "I care about your son very much," she said carefully, "but I think intentions are something Theo and I should discuss privately." "Of course, dear. I just want to ensure you understand that Theodore has responsibilities to the family, to the business, certain expectations that come with his position." The message was clear. "Know your place." "I understand completely," Daria replied, her voice steady despite the storm building in her chest. "Excuse me for a moment." She escaped to the ladies' room, gripping the marble sink as she fought to control her breathing. This had been a mistake. She didn't belong in this world of subtle cruelties and polite warfare. The door opened behind her, and Celeste Kingsley entered like a queen surveying her domain. "You seem like a lovely girl," she said, touching up her lipstick in the mirror. "But surely you can see this infatuation of Theodore's is impractical." "Impractical. He's heir to a fortune, dear. The family name carries obligations, social responsibilities. He needs someone who can navigate those waters, support his position in society." "Someone like you?" Celeste's smile was sharp. "Someone of appropriate background and breeding?" "Yes." Daria turned to face her fully. "With respect, Mrs. Kingsley, I think Theo is capable of making his own decisions about who he wants in his life. Perhaps. But ask yourself this. Do you really want to be the woman who holds him back, who reminds everyone that he chose emotion over wisdom?" The words hit their target perfectly, feeding every insecurity Daria had tried to suppress. She left the restroom feeling smaller, diminished, acutely aware of every difference between herself and the woman who'd raised the man she loved. When she returned to the table, Theo took one look at her face and stood. "We need to go," he announced. "But we haven't had dessert," Richard protested. "We're done here." Theo's voice brooked no argument. He helped Daria from her chair, his touch gentle despite the anger radiating from his frame. In the car, they sat in silence as Theo gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension. "What did she say to you?" he asked finally. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." Daria stared out the window at the passing lights of New Orleans, each one blurring as tears she wouldn't let fall gathered in her eyes. "She's not wrong," she whispered. "What? Your mother? She's not wrong about us being impractical, about me not belonging in your world." Theo pulled over so quickly the car lurched. "Don't you dare let her poison what we have." "She didn't poison anything. She just made me see clearly." Daria finally looked at him, and the pain in his face nearly broke her resolve. "I love you. God help me. I love you so much it scares me, but love doesn't change reality." "What reality?" "That I'll always be the woman who doesn't fit, the one people whisper about, wondering what you see in me, the one who holds you back from the life your family expects." "Fuck what my family expects." "You can say that now, but what about in 5 years? 10? When you've missed opportunities because your wife isn't the right kind of asset?" Theo's hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You are not holding me back. You're the only thing that makes me want to move forward." And Daria believed him. In that moment, in that car, with his hands on her face and love shining in his eyes, she believed him completely. But belief and reality weren't always the same thing. The fight started small and escalated like a summer storm. 3 days after the disaster dinner with his parents, Theo appeared at Daria's apartment with flowers and an apology for his mother's behavior. But the damage was done. Celeste's words had taken root, growing stronger with each passing hour. "You've been different since Friday," Theo said, settling on her worn couch while Brielle pointedly disappeared into her bedroom. "Distant. I've been thinking about—" Daria gestured around her tiny apartment, the peeling paint, the mismatched furniture, the stack of bills on her kitchen counter that never seemed to shrink. "About this. About us. About whether we're being naive thinking this can work. We are making it work. Are we? Or are we just playing house until reality catches up?" Theo's expression darkened. "Is this about my mother? Because I can handle—" "This isn't about your mother." Daria paced the small space, energy crackling through her like electricity. "This is about me realizing that love isn't always enough." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that no matter how much we care about each other, I'm still going to be the woman who needs to check her bank balance before ordering an appetizer. You're still going to be the man whose monthly car payment is more than I make in 6 months. Since when does money matter to you?" "Since always." The words exploded out of her. "Since I was 8 years old, and my grandmother cried because she couldn't afford my school supplies. Since I was 16 and wore the same 3 outfits to school while other kids got new clothes every season. Since I was 22 and had to choose between my education and keeping my family afloat. Theo was quiet, watching her with the kind of careful attention that usually made her feel heard. Tonight, it felt like dissection. Money has always mattered, because not having it shapes every decision you make, she continued. And you can't understand that because you've never lived it. So teach me. I can't teach you 29 years of experience in an evening, Theo. Then what are you saying? That we should break up because we come from different backgrounds? The question hung between them like a blade. Daria sank onto the couch beside him, suddenly exhausted. I'm saying that maybe your mother is right. Maybe we're too different for this to work long-term. My mother is a snob who judges people by their tax brackets. Theo's voice was sharp with anger. I thought you were stronger than letting her opinions matter. This isn't about her opinions. This is about facing facts. What facts? That you offered me a job because you felt sorry for me, that you pay for dinner because you know I can't afford to split the check, that everything about our relationship is colored by the financial imbalance between us. Theo stood abruptly, pacing to the window. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time I paid for anything? When was the last time you let me contribute equally to this relationship? I don't care about money. That's exactly the problem. Daria's voice cracked. You don't care about money because you've never not had it. You can afford to be generous because generosity doesn't cost you anything. So I'm supposed to apologize for having money? No, you're supposed to understand that having it makes you different from people who don't. They stared at each other across her small living room, the distance feeling like an ocean. In the silence, Daria could hear Brielle's TV through the thin walls, the couple upstairs arguing about groceries, the normal sounds of people living normal lives. What do you want from me? Theo asked finally. I want you to stop trying to fix my problems with your checkbook. I want to feel like an equal partner instead of a charity case. You're not, aren't I? Daria's smile was bitter. The job offer, the dinner invitations, the way you insist on paying for everything, how is that different from charity? Theo was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was careful. What if I told you I need you more than you need me? What? What if I told you that before I met you, I was sleepwalking through my life, going through the motions, taking medication just to feel human, wondering if there was any point to any of it? Daria felt her anger deflating, replaced by something more complicated. You changed that, Theo continued. You made me remember what it feels like to want something beyond just surviving. You make me laugh, you challenge me. You see me, not my bank account or my family name, but me, Theo. So, if you want to talk about who needs whom, about who's getting more out of this relationship, I think you're looking at it backwards. He moved closer, sitting beside her on the couch, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his skin. I love you, he said simply. Not because I feel sorry for you, not because I'm trying to fix you, but because you're the first person who's ever made me feel like I'm enough exactly as I am. Daria's defenses crumbled like sand. I love you too. That's what makes this so hard. Then why are we fighting? Because I'm scared. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. I'm scared that one day you'll wake up and realize you could have anyone, and you'll wonder why you chose someone who comes with so many complications. Theo's hands framed her face gently. The only complication is the one you're creating right now. Your parents will learn to accept you or lose their son, their choice. Your friends will see what I see if they matter. If they don't, they were never really friends. Society can go to hell. Despite everything, Daria smiled. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. I love you. You love me. Everything else is just noise. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Daria felt the fight drain out of her, leaving behind the truth she'd been avoiding. She was scared, terrified actually, but not of his money or their differences or what other people thought. She was scared of how much she loved him, of how desperately she wanted this to work, of how much it would destroy her if it didn't. I don't know how to do this, she whispered against his lips. Do what? Love someone who could break my heart. Then we'll figure it out together. Theo's smile was soft, understanding. One day at a time. But even as she melted into his arms, even as they found their way back to each other with kisses and whispered apologies, Daria couldn't shake the feeling that love alone might not be enough to bridge the gap between their worlds. Some differences ran deeper than the heart could reach. The scandal broke on a Tuesday morning in the worst possible way. Daria was reviewing wellness program applications when her phone exploded with notifications. text messages, missed calls, social media alerts, all pointing to the same devastating reality. Someone had leaked photos of her and Theo together, along with details about their relationship that could only have come from inside sources. The headline on the local business blog made her stomach drop. Thorne Pharmaceuticals CEO in secret romance with employee, workplace ethics or exploitation. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the article, which painted their relationship as a textbook case of workplace harassment. The photos were carefully chosen, Theo helping her into his expensive car, the two of them at dinner at an upscale restaurant, him kissing her goodnight outside her modest apartment building. The contrast was stark and damaging. The powerful CEO and the struggling receptionist, wealth and poverty, privilege and desperation. Miss Rivers, Theo's assistant, appeared in her doorway, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Kingsley needs to see you immediately." The walk to his office felt like a death march. Every employee she passed seemed to be whispering, their eyes following her with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. By the time she reached Theo's door, her entire body was trembling. She found him behind his desk, tie loosened, hair disheveled, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past hour. Legal documents were spread across his desk, and his phone buzzed constantly with calls he wasn't answering. "Close the door," he said without looking up. Daria did, then stood awkwardly in front of his desk, unsure whether to sit or flee. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad." Theo finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes nearly brought her to her knees. "The board is meeting in an hour. Legal is recommending we both make statements denying any impropriety." Meaning they want us to say this was all a misunderstanding, that there was never a romantic relationship between us. Daria felt something cold settle in her stomach, and if we don't, then I'm facing potential removal as CEO for ethics violations, and you're looking at wrongful termination lawsuits from employees who think you got preferential treatment. The room spun slightly. Everything they'd built, everything they'd fought for, crumbling because someone had decided their love was newsworthy. "Who did this?" she asked. "We don't know yet. Someone with access to the building. Someone who knew our routines." Theo's jaw clenched. "Legal thinks it might be an employee looking for a payday from the tabloids. Or your mother." The words slipped out before Daria could stop them. Theo's expression went very still. "What?" "She made it clear she didn't approve of me, that she thought I was holding you back. My mother would never—" He stopped, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "She wouldn't do this to her own son, wouldn't she? If she thought she was protecting the family legacy." Before Theo could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, and his face went white. "It's the board chair." He looked at Daria with something that might have been desperation. "What do we do?" In that moment, looking at the man she loved facing the destruction of everything he'd worked for, Daria made the hardest decision of her life. "Has we tell the truth?" "Daria, no, listen to me." She moved around the desk, taking his hands in hers. "We tell them that yes, we're in a relationship. Yes, it started after I got the wellness coordinator position. Yes, we followed proper HR protocols by disclosing it to the appropriate personnel. Did we? We will right now, today." She squeezed his hands. "We tell them that what we have is real, consensual, and none of their damn business." Theo's phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. "They'll destroy us," he said quietly. "Maybe. Or maybe they'll respect us for being honest. And if they don't? If I lose the company?" Daria's heart broke a little at the defeat in his voice. "Then you'll find something else. Something that doesn't require you to hide who you are or who you love." Easy for you to say. You're not the one losing a multi-million-dollar inheritance. The words hit like a physical blow. Daria dropped his hands, stepping back as if he'd slapped her. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm not, because I've never had anything to lose." "Daria, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." Her voice was steady, controlled, even as her world collapsed around her. "And you're not wrong. This is your legacy, your family's company, your entire future. I'm just the woman who's fucking it all up." "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." Theo stood, reaching for her, but she backed away. "Don't. Just don't. We can figure this out," he said desperately. "Together, we can face the board, explain everything." "No." Daria's voice was firm, final. "We can't, because deep down, you know they're right. You know this was always going to end badly." "I don't believe that." "Then why did you just throw my poverty in my face the moment things got difficult?" Theo flinched, as if she'd struck him. "I was scared. I said something stupid because I was scared." And what happens the next time you're scared? The next time choosing me costs you something important. Daria moved toward the door, each step feeling like walking through quicksand. So I won't be the reason you lose everything, Theo. I won't be your regret. You could never be my regret. She paused with her hand on the doorknob, looking back at him one last time. He stood behind his massive desk in his expensive suit, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and power that had always separated them. I could be, she said softly. And someday you might let me be. Daria, please. But she was already gone, walking out of his office, out of the building, out of the life she'd been foolish enough to think could be hers. Behind her, she heard Theo's phone start ringing again, the sound following her all the way to the elevator. The resignation letter was simple, professional, devastating. Dear Mr. Kingsley, please accept this as my formal resignation from my position as wellness coordinator, effective immediately. While I have enjoyed my time at Thorne Pharmaceuticals, recent circumstances make it impossible for me to continue in this role. I wish you and the company all the best. Sincerely, Daria Rivers. She left it on her desk along with her security badge and the key to the office that had felt like hope for exactly 6 weeks. At home, Brielle took one look at her face and didn't ask questions. She just made tea, turned off her phone, and sat beside her sister while Daria cried for the future she'd been brave enough to want and foolish enough to believe in. It's not over, Brielle said finally. Yes, it is. Love like that doesn't just die because of one fight. It does when the fight reveals everything that was wrong from the beginning. Daria wiped her eyes with the tissue Brielle handed her. We were living in a fantasy, pretending that love could overcome everything. Maybe it can. Maybe it can't. Daria pulled her knees to her chest, making herself small. But maybe some differences are too big to bridge. Her phone buzzed with another call from Theo. She'd stopped answering after the 15th attempt. He's been calling all evening, Brielle observed. I know. You're not going to talk to him. What's the point? So he can tell me he's sorry, so we can pretend this was all a misunderstanding. Daria shook her head. The moment things got hard, he reminded me exactly where I stand in his world. Below his money, below his company, below his comfort. He was scared. So was I, but I didn't throw his privilege in his face when I got scared. Brielle was quiet for a moment. So what now? Now I figure out how to start over. Again. That night, Daria lay in her bed listening to the sounds of her neighborhood. Sirens in the distance, the couple upstairs fighting about money, the familiar symphony of people struggling to make it through another day. This was her world, had always been her world. For a few magical weeks, she'd thought she could live in both worlds, his and hers, wealth and want, love bridging every gap. But bridges could collapse under too much weight, and their love, beautiful as it was, hadn't been strong enough to carry them both. Her phone buzzed one more time with a text from Theo. I love you. That hasn't changed. Nothing else matters. But as Daria turned off her phone and pulled her grandmother's quilt up to her chin, she knew that sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes everything else mattered more. 6 months later, the coffee shop in the Marigny was exactly the kind of place Daria had always loved. Mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She sat at her usual table by the window, grading papers from her student teaching assignment at the local elementary school. Going back to school had been terrifying and expensive, and absolutely worth it. The tuition assistance program at her new job, a non-profit focused on educational equity, barely covered the costs, but she was making it work. She always made it work. Ms. Rivers. Daria looked up to find one of her students, 8-year-old Marcus, tugging on his grandmother's hand. This is my teacher, he announced proudly. She's the best teacher in the whole world. Is that so? The grandmother smiled warmly. Well then, she must be very special. She is. She reads us stories and helps with math, and she never gets mad when we ask too many questions. Daria felt her heart swell. This, teaching, shaping young minds, being part of something bigger than herself, this was what she was meant to do. You better get home, she told Marcus. And remember, practice those sight words we talked about. I will. He waved enthusiastically as his grandmother led him away. Daria was packing up her papers when a familiar voice made her freeze. He's right. You know, you are the best teacher in the world. She turned slowly, and there he was. Theodore Ashton Kingsley, standing in her coffee shop in jeans and a simple sweater, looking like he belonged in her world instead of the other way around. Theo. His name came out as barely a whisper. May I sit? She nodded, not trusting her voice. He looked good, healthier somehow, less burdened by the weight of expectations she remembered. "I heard you went back to school," he said, settling across from her. "Sean, I'm proud of you. How did you hear that?" Brielle might have mentioned it when she came to pick up some things from the office. "Brielle came to see you." "She did. Told me I was an idiot for letting you go." His smile was rueful. Among other, less flattering observations, they sat in awkward silence, 6 months of separation and hurt between them like a wall. "How are you?" Daria asked finally. "Different." "Better, I think." Theo adjusted his watch, that nervous habit still intact. "I left Thorne Pharmaceuticals." "What?" The shock in her voice was audible. "You left the company. Turns out you were right about a lot of things, including the fact that I was living someone else's dream." He leaned forward. "I started my own foundation, educational initiatives, healthcare access for underserved communities, using the family money to actually help people instead of just accumulating more." "Theo, that's amazing. I couldn't have done it without you, without everything you taught me about seeing people instead of profit margins." Daria felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm happy for you, really." "Are you happy for you?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you happy? Teaching, living your life, being exactly who you're meant to be?" She considered the question seriously. "Yes, I am. For the first time in my life, I'm doing something that matters to me, something that's mine." "Good." His smile was genuine, warm. "You deserve to be happy. So do you." They sat quietly, watching people come and go, the comfortable silence of two people who had loved each other well, even if they couldn't make it work. "I need to tell you something," Theo said eventually. "About that day when everything fell apart. Theo, please, let me say this." He took a deep breath. "What I said about you not having anything to lose, it was cruel and wrong, and I've regretted it every day since. You were scared. People say things when they're scared. That's not an excuse. You deserved better from me. You deserved someone who would fight for you instead of throwing your circumstances in your face." Daria felt the old hurt surface, but somehow it felt smaller now, less sharp. "We both said things we didn't mean." "Did we?" Theo's honey-brown eyes searched her face. "Because I meant it when I said I loved you. I still mean it." The words hung between them like a bridge Daria wasn't sure she was ready to cross. "Theo, I know. I know we're different people now, that we've both moved on. I just needed you to know that loving you changed me in all the best ways, that even though we couldn't make it work, I don't regret a single moment of what we had." Daria felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I don't regret it either." "Good." He stood, leaving money on the table for both their coffees. "I should let you get back to your papers." He was halfway to the door when Daria called his name. "Theo." He turned back, hope flickering in his expression. "Would you like to get coffee sometime, just to catch up?" His smile could have powered half the city. "I'd like that very much." "Good, because there's something I want to tell you too." "What's that?" "You're not the same man I fell in love with 6 months ago." She paused, gathering courage. "You're better, stronger, more yourself. Is that a good thing?" "It's the best thing." As Theo walked away, Daria pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart do that familiar flutter that meant possibility, that meant hope, that meant maybe, just maybe, some stories got second chances. She wasn't the same woman who had fallen apart in his office 6 months ago either. She was stronger now, more sure of who she was and what she wanted. She had her own life, her own dreams, her own path. And maybe that was exactly what they both needed to be before they could try again. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. But for the first time in months, Daria Rivers was brave enough to believe in fairy tales again. The end. Have you ever had to choose between love and your own self-worth, between what your heart wanted and what your mind knew was practical? Daria and Theo's story shows us that sometimes love means letting go, and sometimes it means finding each other again, when you're both strong enough to meet as equals. What would you have done in Daria's shoes? Would you have fought harder for the relationship, or would you have walked away to protect your heart? Your participation in this channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.